Daniel Brooks put his body between a 200-pound man and the CEO, and he did it with grease still on his hands from fixing a pipe under the building nobody else would touch. The attacker hit the floor hard. Security reached the scene 40 seconds later. Daniel was already standing over the man, breathing steady, one boot on the ground beside him, like he'd done nothing more remarkable than tighten a bolt. The entire lobby froze, because this was the man they laughed at in the elevator. The single dad who wore coveralls to a corporate building. The guy executives talked over at every meeting, the one HR quietly suggested might be more comfortable in a field role. The one nobody invited to lunch. Nobody remembered in the annual bonus review. Nobody counted on for anything beyond keeping the lights on and the pipes quiet. That man just did what 3 trained security guards did not do fast enough, and the CEO, still pressed against the wall, still shaking, looked up at Daniel Brooks and said only one thing. "Who are you? Drop your city in the comments right now. Let's see how far this one travels. And if it already hit somewhere real, subscribe." What comes next will change how you see the quiet man in the room. The morning it happened started exactly like every other morning Daniel Brooks had survived for the past 4 years. His alarm went off at 5:15. He didn't need it anymore. His body had long since learned that sleep was a luxury, not a right. He was already awake, staring at the water stain on the ceiling above his bed. The one he kept meaning to fix, the one his wife Emma had circled with a marker 2 weeks before she died and said, laughing, "Dan, I swear if you don't fix that before winter, I'm hiring someone." He never fixed it. He didn't have the heart to. He lay there for exactly 3 minutes. He always gave himself 3 minutes before the day had to start. And then he heard the sound that got him up every morning faster than any alarm ever could. Small feet on hardwood. Daddy. 7-year-old Lily appeared in the doorway, wearing her dinosaur pajamas, her dark hair a spectacular disaster, one sock on and one sock nowhere to be found. "Morning, Bug," he said, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "Is today a pancake day? Every day you're awake before 6 is a pancake day." She beamed like he'd handed her a winning lottery ticket, disappeared back down the hall, and he heard the sound of her dragging a kitchen chair across the tile to reach the cabinet where he kept the mix. He rubbed his face with both hands. "Get up, Brooks. She needs you moving." That was the deal he had made with himself the morning after the funeral, standing in the kitchen at 3 a.m. with a cold cup of coffee. He didn't remember making every bone in his body wanting to simply stop. The deal was simple: get up. Every day. No matter what. Because Lily was 5 years old, and she needed a father who got up. So he got up. I was at his desk by 7:30. The Meridian Logistics building in downtown Atlanta was the kind of corporate office that looked impressive from the lobby and bureaucratic from everywhere else. Gray cubicles buzzing, fluorescent lights, motivational posters, nobody read, and a coffee machine on the 3rd floor that made sounds like it was in genuine pain. Daniel worked in technical operations. His job, in plain English, was to find the problems in the company's shipping infrastructure before those problems became expensive disasters. He was good at it. Genuinely, quietly, consistently good at it. The kind of good that doesn't get you promoted, it gets you relied upon. It gets you handed more work with a clap on the back and a "great job, Brooks," that never turns into anything else. He'd been there 6 years. I was still in the same pay grade he started in. He didn't complain. He didn't network at the happy hours he was never invited to. He didn't golf, didn't schmooze, didn't know how to work a room the way the people above him seemed to do effortlessly. He showed up, he fixed things, he went home to Lily. That was his world, and he'd made his peace with it. Most days. He noticed Olivia Harper, the way you notice a weather pattern, not all at once, but gradually through accumulation. She sat 3 rows over and 2 desks down in the strategy analysis department, separated from technical ops by a low partition and about 12 feet of beige carpet. She'd been there about a year when Daniel really started paying attention, not in the way people sometimes assumed when they found out a man had been watching a woman, but in the way you watch someone who's trying very hard not to be watched and failing at it in small, heartbreaking ways. She was smart. That much was obvious to anyone paying attention, which Daniel had realized was almost no one. He'd seen her presentations. He'd been in the back of the room twice when she laid out her analysis of the Southeast routing inefficiencies. Clear, precise, backed by data that took him 10 minutes to verify was not just accurate, but visionary. She'd found a flaw in the Q3 carrier contracts that would have cost the company $400,000. Found it, quietly reported it through the proper channels, and watched Marcus Reed stand in front of the executive team 2 weeks later and present it as his own insight. She said nothing. Daniel saw her face when it happened, the way she stared at her notepad, the way her jaw tightened just slightly before she smoothed it out into something blank and professional. He recognized that expression. He wore it a lot himself. But the things that really stayed with him were smaller than that. The way she always sat at the corner table in the break room, the one slightly apart from the others, eating her lunch with her phone propped up like she was busy so no one would wonder why she was alone. The way she laughed too quickly at jokes that weren't that funny, trying to fit into a conversation that hadn't really made space for her. The way she carried a specific kind of stillness in her body when people talked around her, not through her. Around her, like she'd learned to take up less room than she actually needed. He knew the logistics of loneliness when he saw them. He'd been running the same operation himself for 4 years. The first time Daniel spoke to her, genuinely spoke to her beyond morning and excuse me, was a Tuesday afternoon in October, 7 months before everything changed. He was working late, which was not unusual. The floor was mostly empty. The cleaning crew had come and gone. The overhead lights had switched to their dim after-hours mode, and the only real light in the bullpen came from a cluster of monitors on the far side of the floor. Her monitors. He walked past on his way to the printer and stopped. She was asleep at her desk. Not dramatically asleep, just that particular collapse of someone who sat down for 1 minute and the body took over her cheek, resting on her folded arm, her reading glasses still on one hand, still loosely holding a pen. He stood there for a second, genuinely unsure what to do. Waking her felt intrusive. Leaving felt wrong. On her desk, he noticed a coffee mug that was empty and had clearly been empty for a while. Her dinner, if you could call it that, was a granola bar still in its wrapper, untouched. He went to the break room, made a fresh pot, filled her mug and set it quietly on the edge of her desk away from the papers. Set the granola bar back where it was, but next to it put the apple he'd been planning to eat on his drive home. She stirred as he was turning to leave. Oh God! She sat up fast, glasses askew, deeply disoriented. I'm so sorry I wasn't. Relax, he said, keeping his voice low. It's 8:40, you're fine. She blinked at him, then at the mug, then back at him. Did you make that? The machine's pretty straightforward once you get past the sounds it makes. She looked at the apple. Something moved across her face that he couldn't quite name, and she quickly looked away. You didn't have to do that. Wasn't a big deal. I didn't ask you to. People don't usually ask for things they need, he said simply, and picked up his own bag from the chair. Drive safe, Harper. He was halfway to the elevator when he heard her say quietly, almost to herself, Thank you. He hit the down button. Anytime. After that it became a thing, not a conversation, not a friendship exactly. Something quieter and more useful than that. He noticed her chair made a specific sound when the right rear leg caught on the carpet seam, a slight wobble that she compensated for without thinking, bracing her left arm against the desk. He brought a small toolkit from home and fixed it one morning before she arrived. When she came in and sat down, she shifted twice, waiting for the wobble that didn't come. She looked at the chair, looked around, said nothing. He noticed she had a particular habit of skipping lunch on high-stress days, not as a diet, but because she forgot, because the work swallowed her whole. On those days, a brown bag would appear on the corner of her desk by noon. Nothing elaborate. A sandwich from the deli downstairs. A bottle of water. Once a container of soup from the Thai place she'd mentioned offhand in a department-wide conversation she probably didn't think anyone had actually listened to. She knew it was him. She never said so directly. But once, maybe the 4th or 5th time, she walked past his desk and slid a sticky note onto his keyboard without stopping. I'm not helpless, you know. He picked it up, thought for a moment, found a pen, wrote under it, I know. That's not why. He stuck it back on her monitor. She read it. didn't respond. But that afternoon she brought him a coffee without being asked exactly the way he made it, which meant she'd been paying attention. So had she. What he didn't know then, what he wouldn't piece together until much later, was that Olivia had been paying attention to more than his coffee order. She'd seen him in the parking lot 3 weeks after that first late night sitting in his car for 20 minutes after the workday ended his forehead against the steering wheel. She hadn't been sure if he was sick or upset or just exhausted. She'd almost knocked on the window. Didn't. She'd overheard, not intentionally, but the walls in the HR annex were thin. A conversation between Daniel and the benefits coordinator about whether he could defer the next payroll contribution to Lily's education fund just for 1 quarter. His voice had been careful and steady, the way people get when they're fighting to stay composed in front of a stranger. The coordinator had given him a form. He'd thanked her. Olivia had sat with that for 3 days. She was in a position between her role and her access to the company's internal grant program, an employee development fund that most people didn't know existed and almost no one applied to do something about it. The application required a supervisor nomination, but the review committee was hers to manage, and she knew the criteria inside and out. She submitted the paperwork herself. She listed the nominating supervisor as a name she knew would not be checked against a manager who'd left the company 2 months prior. She worded the application in language so precisely calibrated to the grant criteria that it was essentially impossible to deny. 6 weeks later, a check appeared in Daniel's HR file. Educational support for dependents of long-term employees. $1,400. When he saw it, he'd gone to HR 3 times asking where it came from. They showed him the paperwork. He stared at the nominating supervisor's name. He knew that manager was gone. He sat with that for a long time. He never brought it up to Olivia directly. But the following Monday, he came in early and fixed the slow drain in the break room sink that everyone complained about, and no one ever reported to maintenance because he knew she was the one who used it first every morning. That was how they communicated. In actions. In things quietly done and never claimed. The night before everything fell apart, Daniel almost told her. They'd both been pulled into an emergency review session that ran past 9 o'clock. A routing crisis that turned out to be exactly the kind of thing Daniel found, and Olivia translated into executive language. They'd worked together for the first time directly side by side at a conference table, everyone else having found a reason to leave. Around 8:30, he'd handed her a marker and said, "Walk me through the Southern Corridor issue, from the top." She'd stood at the whiteboard and laid it out clean, methodical, devastating in its clarity. He'd asked questions. She'd answered them without hesitation. For an hour, they'd spoken in the only language both of them seemed to be fluent in: problem-evident solution. When it was done, she'd capped the marker and looked at the board and said almost to herself, "Why don't they put us in the same room more often?" "Because that would require someone upstairs to notice we exist," he said. She'd laughed, a real laugh, the kind that caught her off guard. Not the careful, compressed laugh she used in group settings. An actual, unguarded laugh that changed her whole face. He'd almost said something then. "You know you're the reason that Q3 contract didn't blow up in everyone's faces, right? You know Marcus took your work and put his name on it, and you let him because you've spent so long being invisible that being stolen from felt normal. You know I see that, and I think it's wrong, and I think you are." He stopped himself. "What? What are you going to say, Brooks?" Instead, he'd gathered his things and said, "Good work tonight," which was true, and drove home to relieve the neighbor watching Lily, and lay awake thinking about a conversation he didn't have the courage to start. The next morning was the all-hands quarterly review. Daniel sat in the back. He always sat in the back, not because he was required to, but because it gave him sightlines across the room. He could see who was paying attention and who wasn't, which systems were about to fail, based on which people were sweating, and also, if he was being completely honest with himself, he could see Olivia's seat from the back row without being obvious about it. She was seated near the front, which was not her preference, but the seats had been assigned. She had her notebook. She looked composed. She looked in the careful way she'd mastered, like someone who was fine. He knew she wasn't sleeping well. He'd heard her tell someone on the phone in the hallway yesterday that the migraines were getting worse. He didn't know she hadn't eaten that morning. He didn't know that she'd spent the previous night in her apartment alone, struggling through a headache that had gone from manageable to catastrophic. Somewhere around 2 a.m. Telling herself it would pass. Telling herself she just needed to get through the day. Telling herself the way she'd been telling herself for 34 years to push through and stop making everything about herself. Marcus Reed was at the front of the room 45 minutes into a presentation that was largely assembled from other people's work when Daniel noticed her. She was pale. Not pale in the way people get when they're bored. Pale in the way you get when something is genuinely wrong, when the body starts quietly routing power away from the face because it needs it somewhere more urgent. He sat up straighter. She reached up and pressed 2 fingers against her temple. A small private gesture. Barely visible unless you were looking. He was looking. She shifted in her seat. Reached for the water glass in front of her. Her hand wasn't quite steady. Olivia. Marcus's voice rolled on in the front of the room, talking about Q4 projections. Daniel was already pushing to his feet. I didn't know what he was going to do. He had no plan. He was moving before the thought completed itself. Stepping quietly along the back wall, cutting toward her row, because something in the back of his skull was saying, "Go with the same certainty," it said, "wake up every morning." He was 3 rows away when she went. It wasn't dramatic. There was no cry, no crash. She simply ceased, like a light going out. Her chin dropped to her chest, her body tilted sideways, and if the woman next to her hadn't screamed, the room might not have noticed for another 5 seconds. But Daniel was already moving. He crossed the distance at a dead sprint, caught her before her head hit the table, took the weight of her in both arms, as her chair slid back and lowered her to the floor, as carefully as if she were made of something breakable. Around him, the room erupted. "Call 911. Does anyone know CPR? Marcus, should we clear the room? Someone call HR." He heard all of it, and none of it. He was checking her pulse, which was there fast and unsteady, but there. She was breathing. Her skin was clammy and wrong. He loosened the collar of her blazer, tilted her head slightly, got his phone out with one hand, and dialed with his thumb. 911. What's your emergency? I have a woman approximately 34, she's lost consciousness. Pulse is present but rapid, she's sweating. She went down fast, no fall injury. I need an ambulance. He gave the address. He gave the floor. He gave the suite number. He stayed on the line. Around him, 23 people with job titles above, his stood and watched. Marcus Reed stood at the front of the room with his presentation still running on the screen behind him and said, Someone should maybe clear the area, Daniel said flatly without looking up. Give her air. Nobody moved. Clear the area. His voice was different that time. Not loud, just absolutely certain. The kind of voice that does not leave room for alternatives. People moved. The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. Daniel had sat on the floor the entire time, monitoring her breathing, keeping one hand near her shoulder so she'd have contact if she surfaced. He talked to the 911 dispatcher. He answered every question about her symptoms, her timeline, what he'd observed over the past 24 hours. When the paramedics came through the door, he stood and stepped back and answered everything they asked with the clean, precise clarity of someone who had been paying attention. You family? One of the paramedics asked. No, colleague. You the one who caught her? Yeah. The paramedic looked at him for a second. Good catch. They loaded her onto the gurney. Someone from HR appeared at Daniel's elbow, a woman named Sandra he'd spoken to maybe twice, and said, We'll take it from here, Daniel. You can go back. I'm going with her, he said. Sandra blinked. She has family. I'm sure we can. Do you have a number for her family? A pause. We'd need to look into her file. Then I'm going with her, he said again, and picked up his jacket. The waiting room at Piedmont, Atlanta, was the kind of place that existed outside of time. Beige walls, television, mounted too high to watch comfortably, chairs bolted to each other in rows, a vending machine humming in the corner. The kind of place where time didn't pass so much as accumulate. Daniel sat in a chair against the wall and waited. He texted his neighbor, Mrs. Paulson, to ask if she could pick Lily up from school. She said yes without asking why, because she'd been picking up Lily without asking why for 4 years. He texted his supervisor, not Marcus, but his direct manager, Kevin, to say there was a family emergency, which wasn't accurate, but was close enough to the truth that he didn't spend long choosing the word. He sat. He had a half-eaten granola bar in his jacket pocket, which he ate without tasting. He bought a water from the vending machine. He found that if he stared at the tile pattern on the floor in a slightly unfocused way, the waiting became easier. He was good at waiting. He'd waited in rooms like this before. He'd sat in a chair outside an ICU for 11 hours the night Emma's car was hit on I-285, checking his phone every 4 minutes for an update that finally came from a doctor who looked too young and said too little in words that changed everything. He was not going to let that happen here. He didn't examine that feeling too closely. He just sat and kept his phone on and waited. It was 2 hours and 17 minutes before anyone came out to talk to him. A nurse, middle-aged, efficient kind, in the specific practiced way of someone who spent their professional life talking to frightened people, came through the door and looked around the waiting room. Her eyes settled on Daniel, the only person there. "Are you here for Olivia Harper?" He stood. "Yes." "Are you family?" "No, we work together. I'm the one who brought her in." The nurse studied him for a moment, something calculating in her expression, not unfriendly, just assessing. Then she said, "She's stable. She was severely dehydrated. Her blood pressure dropped significantly, and she has a migraine with neurological involvement. It's called a hemiplegic migraine, which can present a lot like a stroke but isn't. She's conscious now. She's going to be okay." He let out a breath he'd been holding for 2 hours and 17 minutes. "Okay," he said. "Good, that's good." "She's asking for paperwork," the nurse said with the kind of faint smile that meant she'd seen stranger things. She woke up, and the first thing she wanted was to fill out her own intake forms. He almost laughed. "Almost. That sounds right." The nurse held out a clipboard. "I'm actually hoping you can help with one section, her emergency contacts." She paused. "She's already filled it out, but she'd like you to see it." He took the clipboard. The form was standard hospital intake insurance information, medical history, allergy notations. He found the emergency contact section near the bottom of the second page. There was one name. His name. Daniel Brooks. His cell number, which she'd memorized apparently at some point without telling him. And in the relationship field, not family, not friend, not colleague, she'd written 6 words. 6 words in her careful, precise handwriting. "The person who always made me feel valued." He stood in the middle of that waiting room, holding a hospital clipboard, and for the first time in 4 years, he couldn't keep his face entirely under control. He pressed his thumb and forefinger to the bridge of his nose and breathed in through his teeth. The nurse was quiet for a moment. "She said you'd want to know," she said gently, "before you decided whether to stay or go." He looked up. "Where is she?" The room they'd moved her to was small and quiet, the machines doing their calm, steady work, an IV in her left arm, a blood pressure cuff on autopilot every 15 minutes. She had her hair down, which he'd never seen. She looked smaller without the blazer, without the careful professional armor of the office. She looked like a person who was very tired and had been very tired for a very long time. Her eyes were open when he came in. She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her working out what to say, running through the options, the way she ran through data sets, efficient, systematic, trying to find the right framing. He didn't give her the chance. He pulled the chair from the corner of the room, set it next to the bed, sat down, held up the clipboard. "You want to explain this?" he asked. She looked at it, looked at him. Her jaw shifted slightly. "I didn't have anyone else to put," she said. "Olivia, I mean it literally. I don't have my parents are in Phoenix. We're not. It's complicated. My sister and I don't really..." She stopped. "I didn't have anyone else to put." "That's not what it says," he said quietly. He looked at the form again, at the 6 words, then back at her. "This isn't 'I didn't have anyone else.' You wrote, I know what I wrote." Then say it. She looked at the ceiling. Her throat moved. You're the only person in that building, she said slowly, who has ever looked at me like I'm... She stopped. Tried again. Like I'm worth looking at. Not because of what I produce or what I know or what I can do for someone. Just... Her voice was very steady. The kind of steady that costs something. Just because I'm there. He didn't say anything for a moment. The chair, he said. What? You noticed. When I fixed your chair, you noticed. Of course I noticed. Most people don't notice things like that. I notice everything, she said. That's the problem. I notice everything and no one notices me back, and I've gotten very... She pressed her lips together. I've gotten very used to that. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the clipboard resting across them. I noticed you, he said. The first week you were here. I noticed you in the Q3 presentation, and I noticed you when Marcus took your analysis and put his name on it. And I noticed you eating lunch alone every day for a year. And I noticed that you come in before anyone else, because you like the building when it's quiet. And I noticed... He stopped, steadied himself. I noticed you, Olivia. I've been noticing you for a long time. The room was very quiet. The blood pressure machine cycled. Why didn't you say anything? She asked. Because I'm the guy in the back row, he said. I don't say things. I fix chairs. She looked at him. For the first time since he'd walked in the room, something in her face let go. Not a lot, just slightly, just around the edges. Like a window cracked open in a room that's been closed too long. I submitted that grant application, she said, for Lily's education fund. He nodded slowly. I know. You knew. I figured it out. The timing, the committee, the way the paperwork was worded. He paused. You didn't have to do that. People don't usually ask for things they need, she said quietly. It took him a second. She was giving him his own words back. He looked at her for a long moment. Yeah, he said. I guess they don't. He stayed until visiting hours ended. He didn't hold her hand. It wasn't that kind of moment. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But he stayed. He sat in the chair and they talked. Really talked for the first time in the year, and some change they'd been circling each other in those offices. He told her about Emma. Not all of it. Not the 11 hours in the ICU waiting room. Not the 3 a.m. kitchen moment with the cold coffee, but enough. He told her about the water stain on his ceiling that he couldn't bring himself to fix. He told her about Lily and the dinosaur pajamas and the pancake rule. She told him about Phoenix, about her parents who'd loved her but never quite known what to do with her, too much, too smart, too sensitive, too loud, and then too quiet when she'd learned to dial it back. About the job she'd had before Meridian, where a VP had systematically used her research and marginalized her simultaneously. And when she'd finally said something about it, the response had been calibrated and corporate and designed to make her feel like the problem. She told him about the migraines which had started 2 years ago, and which she'd been managing alone because going to a doctor felt like admitting something was wrong, and she'd spent her entire adult life making sure nothing was visibly wrong with her. That's a hard way to live, he said. It's the only way I know. I know. He looked at his hands. I lived that way too. Still do some days. She was quiet for a moment. Is it better? She asked. Having Lily. He thought about it honestly. It's different, he said. She needs me to show up, so I show up. But she also... He paused. She sees me. Kids see you. You know, they don't care about your job title or whether you belong in the room. She just sees her dad. He looked up. It's the one place I'm not invisible. Olivia looked at him for a long time. You're not invisible to me, she said. He held that. I didn't know exactly what it meant, or what it would become, or whether two people carrying this much quiet damage could manage to be something to each other without adding to the weight. He didn't know any of that yet, but he knew he was going to stay in that chair until they made him leave. And he knew when he finally drove home to relieve Mrs. Paulson and carry a sleeping Lily from the couch to her bed, and stand in the dark hallway listening to her breathe that something had shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way things shifted in movies with music and golden light. Just quietly. The way a door opens in a house you'd stopped expecting doors to open in. He looked at the ceiling above his bed. The water stain. I'm going to fix that, he thought. Not yet. But soon. He lay down. For the first time in a very long time, he was asleep before midnight. He drove home that night with both hands on the wheel and his mind somewhere else entirely. Mrs. Paulson had left the porch light on which she always did, and when he came through the door, she was asleep in the recliner with the television on. Lo, one of Lily's drawings spread across her lap like a blanket. He stood there for it, looking at that picture. A crayon house with a yellow sun and two figures outside one, tall and one very small, and felt something in his chest that he didn't have a name for. He carried Lily to bed without waking her. She stirred once just long enough to say "Daddy" and grab a fistful of his shirt, then went back under. He sat on the edge of her mattress in the dark for a full 3 minutes, watching her breathe before he trusted himself to stand up and leave the room. In the kitchen, he stood at the sink and ran cold water over his hands, staring at nothing. Olivia Harper had written his name on that form. Not because he was the obvious choice. Not because he was close by. But because in a building full of people who knew her name, who sat in meetings with her, who benefited from her work, he was the one she trusted when everything went wrong. That was a weight he hadn't asked to carry. He found sitting at his kitchen table at 11:15 at night with a glass of water. He wasn't drinking that he didn't mind carrying it at all. The next morning he was at the hospital by 8. He brought coffee. 2 cups the way she took hers, which he knew because he'd been paying attention for over a year, and he knocked once on her room door and waited. "Come in," she said. She was sitting up. She had her laptop open, which did not surprise him. The IV was still in her arm, which she appeared to be ignoring. She was wearing the hospital gown with the studied dignity of someone who had decided that if they had to be in a hospital gown, they were going to be in one with their spine straight. He held up the coffee. She looked at it, then at him. Something shifted in her expression that she quickly rearranged. "You didn't have to come back," she said. "I know." He crossed the room, set 1 cup on her tray table, pulled the chair from the corner, and sat down. The same chair. The same corner. Like they'd established a geography the night before, and he was simply returning to his position. She looked at the coffee, looked at him, closed the laptop. "How's Lily?" she asked. "She drew me a picture of our house last night. The sun was bigger than the house." "Kids get priorities right," Olivia said. "Usually." He leaned back. "How are you feeling?" "Better, humiliated, functional." "Humiliated why?" "Because I collapsed in front of the entire company," she said flatly. "Because I had to be carried off the floor. Because half the executive team saw me at my absolute worst, and the other half are going to hear about it by lunch." "You didn't collapse because you were weak," he said. "You collapsed because you hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, and were running a hemiplegic migraine like it was a mild inconvenience." She stared at him. "How do you know what kind of migraine it was?" "I asked the nurse last night. I looked it up." The silence that followed was the kind that happens when someone does something so straightforwardly caring that the other person doesn't have a framework for it. "Why would you do that?" she asked quietly. "Because if something is happening to someone I care about," he said, "I want to understand it." She looked away. Her jaw worked for a second. She picked up the coffee and took a careful sip. "Marcus is going to make this a problem," she said. And just like that, the temperature in the room changed. He watched her do it, watched her pull the armor back on, piece by piece, watched the careful professional mask slide back into place. Her voice was different now. Controlled. Efficient. The voice she used in meetings when she was presenting data she knew was going to be challenged. "What do you mean he's going to make it a problem?" Daniel asked. "He called this morning." She set the coffee down with a precision that suggested she was managing how hard she set it down. "He wanted to know my timeline for returning. He used the word optics twice. He said, and I'm giving you the exact phrasing here, that the company hoped I would understand the importance of maintaining a professional image in client-facing environments." Daniel went very still. "He said that to you, while you're in the hospital?" He did. This morning. 8:47 a.m. She met his eyes. He wanted to make sure I understood that whatever happened yesterday, the Q4 client presentation is next Friday, and my absence would be, he said, challenging to explain. Daniel said nothing for a long moment. The thing about Daniel Brooks was that people mistook his quietness for passivity. They mistook the fact that he didn't raise his voice for the fact that he had nothing to say. What was actually happening in those quiet moments was that he was deciding something. And once Daniel Brooks decided something, he did not undecide it. "Olivia," he said, "how long has he been doing this?" She blinked. "Doing what?" "Using you. Taking your work. Keeping you quiet." He watched her face. "How long?" She looked at the window. The light came in at an angle across the hospital bed, across the IV line, across her hands folded in her lap. "Since the beginning," she said. "Since my second week." "Tell me." She turned back to him. "Why?" "Because someone should know," he said. "Because it matters. And because you've been carrying it alone, and that's not—" He stopped, chose his words. "That's not right, Olivia. Someone should know." She studied him for a long time with those precise evaluating eyes that had built her career on seeing through things quickly and accurately. "You're going to do something about it," she said. It wasn't a question. "I don't know yet," he said. "But first I need to know what it is." She was quiet for almost a full minute. He didn't push. He'd learned with Lily, with the people he cared about, that some things had to come at their own pace. You couldn't pull them out. You had to make enough space that they could come forward on their own. "It started with the Southern Corridor analysis," she said finally. "My first month. I found an error in the primary carrier contracts, not a small one, a structural one, that would have caused a cascading delay across 4 distribution hubs. I wrote it up. I presented it to Marcus directly because he was the department head, and that was protocol." She paused. "He thanked me. Sent me an email that night telling me it was excellent work and he'd bring it to the executive team." She paused again. 2 weeks later, he presented it to the board. Used my exact data, my exact projections, my exact language and places. My name appeared nowhere. "And you said nothing." "I said nothing," she confirmed. "I was new. I needed the job. I told myself it was a mistake, a miscommunication, an oversight." She looked down at her hands. Then it happened again with the Q3 contracts. Then with the vendor renegotiation. Then with the logistics restructuring proposal that I spent 3 months building and that Marcus presented at the national conference in March with his face on the cover slide. Her voice was still steady. That was the thing that got him the steadiness. The way she'd trained herself to describe these things without letting them move her face. By that point, it wasn't a mistake. It was a system. He knew exactly what I was capable of producing. He also knew exactly what I would and wouldn't do about it. "What did he know you wouldn't do?" She met his eyes. "He knew I wouldn't fight back," she said simply. "Because I'd tried once at my last company. Different situation, same pattern. I reported it through proper channels. HR investigated. The VP I'd reported had been there 15 years and had relationships with everyone on the committee. I was managed out within 4 months." She paused. "Marcus knows about that. I don't know how, but he does. And he's used it. Not directly, he's too careful for that. But in small ways. Reminders. Comments in front of other people that were technically harmless, but were designed to let me know he had leverage." She looked out the window again. "He knows I can't afford another bad reference. He knows I'm not going to blow this up." Daniel leaned forward. "He's wrong about that," he said quietly. She looked at him sharply. "Daniel." "He's wrong," he said again. Calm. Certain. The way he sounded when he told the 911 dispatcher the suite number. The way he sounded when he told 23 people to clear the area. Not because you're going to do something reckless, but because he's operating on information that's out of date. "What does that mean?" "It means he figured you out when you were alone," he said. "You're not alone anymore." She stared at him. The blood pressure machine cycled. Somewhere down the hall a phone rang and was answered. "You barely know me," she said. I know you well enough, he said. Daniel, you have a daughter, you have a mortgage, you have a job that you need. You can't. Olivia. He waited until she stopped. I know what I can and can't do. I've been calculating that since Emma died every single day. I know exactly what I have to lose, and I know exactly what I'm willing to risk. He held her gaze. And I'm telling you that I'm not walking away from this. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. Not the controlled professional voice. Not the careful public voice. Something underneath both of those. I don't know how to let someone help me, she said. I know, he said. I'm not great at it either, she almost smiled. Just barely, just at the edges. We're a disaster, she said. Probably, he agreed. But we're a disaster with the same problem, and I have a feeling you're a lot better at solving problems than you give yourself credit for. She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw something happen behind her eyes. Some internal recalculation, some shift in the equation she'd been running on herself for a very long time. The Q3 analysis, she said slowly. The original version. I have it. Okay. The full version. With my name on every page, with the version history showing I authored it with the metadata intact. I saved it to a personal drive the night I finished it because something told me to. She paused. I have the original for every project he's used. Every single one. Daniel felt the shift in the room. How many projects? He asked. 7, she said. Over 14 months. 7 significant analyses that he presented as his own to the executive team or to external clients. She paused. If someone were looking for a pattern of intellectual property theft within a corporation, 7 documented instances with intact metadata would be considered a very strong evidentiary foundation. He looked at her. She looked at him. You already knew what you had, he said slowly. I've known for 8 months, she said. I just didn't know what to do with it, or who to trust with it. She let that land. I still don't entirely trust people, Daniel. I want to be honest about that. That's fair, he said. But I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in a long time, she said. And I don't entirely understand why, and it makes me uncomfortable, and I'm telling you anyway, because apparently nearly dying in front of the whole company has recalibrated my threshold for emotional risk. He let out a breath that was nearly a laugh. Okay, he said. So here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to do anything reckless. We're not going to blow anything up without a plan. We're not going to give Marcus any reason to get ahead of this. He thought for a moment. What I am going to do is talk to Kevin, your supervisor. My supervisor who has been at the company 11 years and has a deeply adversarial relationship with Marcus that he's been too smart to act on, who also happens to know every compliance procedure in the employee handbook by memory, because he's filed 3 of them. He looked at her. Does that work for you? Olivia was quiet for a moment. He could see her running it, assessing the angles, checking for vulnerabilities, the way she checked everything. Kevin Marsh, she said. You know him. I know of him. He was the one who pushed back on the vendor renegotiation structure before Marcus rewrote it. He was right, and Marcus overruled him, and it cost the company $60,000 in the following quarter. She paused. He's not going to like what I tell him. No, Daniel agreed. He's going to be furious, which is exactly what we need. She was quiet again. Then she said, what if it doesn't work? What if they protect Marcus anyway? He's been there 12 years. He has relationships with the board. Then we document everything we escalate to HR's external compliance channel, and if that fails, we take it to the state labor board. He said it matter-of-factly, the way he laid out a technical problem. I'm not saying it's going to be clean. I'm saying we're not just going to absorb it and move on. She stared at him. You've thought about this, she said. I had a lot of time in that waiting room. Something moved across her face. Not a smile exactly. Something more complicated and more real than a smile. Daniel, she said. Why are you doing this honestly? Because I need to understand it. I've spent a year watching you do things for people without any apparent expectation of return, and I cannot figure out the mechanism. He looked at his hands for a moment. My wife, he said. Emma. She used to say that the whole point of being capable of something was that you did it when it was needed. She didn't mean it in a grand way. She meant it the way you'd say you're strong enough to carry the grocery bags, so you carry the grocery bags. Don't make it complicated. He looked up. I'm capable of this. You need it. So. Olivia looked at him for a long time. She sounds like she was remarkable, she said quietly. She was the best person I knew, he said. She still is. I just don't get to talk to her anymore. The room was very quiet. I'm sorry, Olivia said. And she meant it in a way that was neither performative nor insufficient. She just meant it cleanly and directly, the way she did everything when she let herself do it honestly. Thank you, he said. They sat for a while after that, not talking in the way that you can only sit with someone when something real has passed between you and the silence afterward is not empty but full. Then Olivia said, I need to get out of this hospital. Doctor said tomorrow morning if your blood pressure stays stable. I know what the doctor said. I'm saying I need to get out of here because I cannot plan from a hospital bed. I think better when I'm moving. Then we plan tomorrow, he said. Tonight you rest. She looked like she was going to argue. He looked back at her with the specific expression of a man who had spent 4 years getting a 7-year-old to do things she didn't want to do and had gotten very good at holding a line without raising his voice. She sighed. Fine. Good. But I want the drive, she said. Can you get to my apartment? I'll give you the key. The drive is in the top drawer of the desk in the second bedroom. It's in a red case. Bring it here tonight. He looked at her. You want me to go to your apartment? Is that a problem? No, he said. I just want to make sure I understood. You understood. She paused. A beat. The key is in my desk at the office, top right drawer, which means you'll need to go there first. I'll need a reason to be at your desk. Tell them I asked you to get my laptop charger, she said, which is also in that drawer, so it won't even be a lie. He looked at her. When did you plan this? He asked. About 40 seconds after you walked in this morning, she said. He shook his head, but he was almost smiling. What else? He asked. I need you to find out if Marcus has scheduled anything for the Q4 prep in the next 3 days. Not through the official calendar, he controls what goes on the official calendar. Ask Linda in executive admin. Tell her you're trying to coordinate a technical review. She'll tell you everything. Linda Chen. She's despised Marcus since 2022. She'll be forthcoming. He stared at her. How do you know that? I know things, Olivia said simply. I've spent a year being invisible. Invisible people hear everything. And there it was, the thing he'd sensed in her from the beginning, but never had language for. Underneath the self-doubt, underneath the armor she'd built out of years of being underestimated, there was a mind that had been cataloging everything. Every conversation, every relationship, every vulnerability in the structure around her. She'd never used it because she'd never had a reason to believe using it was safe. She had a reason now. Olivia, he said. I need you to hear something. She waited. Whatever we do with this, whatever Marcus ends up facing, it's not revenge. I don't want you going into it as revenge. Revenge is a strategy that makes you feel better for about a week, and then turns into something you carry. He looked at her steadily. What this is correction. There's a wrong thing happening, and it needs to stop, that's all. She held his gaze for a moment. I know, she said. I'm not doing this for revenge. She paused. I'm doing it because I'm tired. I'm tired of shrinking. I'm tired of watching the wrong thing happen and telling myself there's nothing I can do about it. She stopped. Something hardened in her expression, not with anger, but with resolution. The specific kind of resolution that comes from a person who has waited long enough and finally decided to stop waiting. I'm tired of being the person who makes everything work and gets nothing in return. I'm tired of being the name on no one's form. Her voice caught very slightly on that last sentence. He didn't fill the silence. He let it stand. Then she said quietly, steadily, I put your name on that form because you were the only person I could imagine wanting to see when things got bad. And I want to be someone who deserves that. Not just someone who's grateful for it. Someone who gives it back. He looked at her for a long time. "You already give it back," he said. "You've been giving it back since the day you figured out how to get that grant for Lily." She looked away. Her eyes were bright. She blinked twice and kept her chin level, and he respected her enough not to comment on it. "Go get the drive," she said, "and the charger, and find out what Marcus has scheduled. And then, she said, we figure out what to do with 7 documented cases of intellectual property theft against a senior executive who thinks he's completely untouchable." She said it the same way she talked about the Q3 routing inefficiencies. Clear, precise, devastating. He stood up, picked up his jacket. "I'll be back by 6, he said. "The charger is in the top right drawer," she said. "Red case is behind the file folders. Don't let anyone see you take the drive." "I know how to be invisible," he said. "I've been practicing for 6 years." She looked at him. And this time, she did smile, not the careful public version, not the compressed version she used in group settings. The real one. The one that changed her whole face. "Get out of here," she said. "Go fix something." He went. In the hallway, he passed a nurse who nodded at him and said, "You're here early. You her husband." He opened his mouth to say no, to say colleague, to say we work together, to say the practical, accurate thing that described the box they'd been living in for 14 months. Instead, he said, "We're figuring it out." The nurse smiled, like that was an answer she'd heard before and liked. He walked to the elevator and hit the button for the ground floor. In his jacket pocket, his phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. He looked at it in the elevator. It was from a work email address, a generic one, the kind the system generated automatically. It said only 4 words. "She doesn't trust you." He stared at it as the elevator descended. Then it buzzed again. Same number. 3 more words. "Neither should you." The elevator opened. He stood there for a second looking at the screen. Then he put the phone in his pocket and walked out into the Atlanta morning. Somebody knew he'd been in that hospital room. Somebody knew what they were starting. And whoever it was wanted him scared enough to stop before he started. He got in his car. He drove toward the office. He was not scared. He was, for the first time in a very long time, completely certain about exactly what he was doing and exactly why he was doing it. And that he knew from experience was the most dangerous thing a quiet man could be. The anonymous texts were still sitting in his phone when he pushed through the front doors of Meridian Logistics at 9:47 that morning. He didn't delete them. He screenshotted both, sent them to his personal email, then put his phone away and walked to his desk like a man who had somewhere to be and nothing to apologize for. The floor felt different. He noticed it immediately, the way people's eyes moved when he passed that specific quality of attention that wasn't quite looking and wasn't quite looking away. The conference room where Olivia had gone down was visible through the glass partition at the far end of the hall, and somebody had rearranged the chairs since yesterday, but nothing else had changed. The fluorescent lights still buzzed. The coffee machine still sounded like it was suffering. The motivational posters still said things nobody believed, but the way people watched him walk to his desk told him that yesterday had shifted something in the social architecture of this building, and that shift had not gone unnoticed. Sandra from HR appeared at his elbow before he'd even gotten his computer on. "Daniel," she said. "Marcus would like a word." He looked at her. "When?" "Now, if possible, if." He thought about Olivia in that hospital bed with her laptop open and her spine straight and a red drive in the desk drawer of her second bedroom. He thought about 7 documented cases of intellectual property theft sitting on that drive. Intact metadata preserved her name on every original page. "Tell him I have a technical review first thing," he said. "I can do 11. Sandra's expression did something complicated. She was not Daniel had always thought a bad person. She was a person who had learned to survive in a particular ecosystem by being useful to whoever was most powerful in any given moment. That was a survival strategy he understood, even if it wasn't one he could use. "He said it was urgent," she said. 11, Daniel said pleasantly, and turned on his computer. She left. He had exactly 40 minutes before someone reported back to Marcus that he wasn't coming at 9:47, which meant he had 40 minutes to do what he came in to do. He was already moving. He went to Kevin Marsh's office first. Kevin was 53, former military logistics, the kind of man who kept his desk at a precise 90-degree angle and had opinions about cable management. He'd been at Meridian 11 years and had spent most of them watching the company make decisions he knew were wrong and filing the appropriate objections through the appropriate channels and watching those objections get filed and ignored. He was not a bitter man, but he was a precise one, and precision in a person who's been consistently overruled has a way of hardening into something that's just waiting for the right moment. Daniel knocked twice and went in without waiting. Kevin looked up. "Brooks, heard you had a hell of a morning yesterday." "I need 20 minutes, Daniel said. "And I need you to hear something without telling me it's above your pay grade." Kevin studied him for a second. Then he pushed back from his desk and crossed his arms. "Close the door," he said. Daniel closed the door. He sat down across from Kevin and laid it out. Not all of it, not the hospital, not the form with his name on it, not the texts. Just the facts as they pertain to the work. He explained what Olivia had told him. The 7 analyses, the 14 months, the pattern, the metadata. He watched Kevin's face as he talked and watched it go through several distinct phases. Skepticism, recognition, calculation, and then a very specific kind of controlled fury that Daniel associated with men who had been right about something for a long time and had just been handed the proof. When Daniel finished, Kevin was quiet for a moment. "She has the originals," Kevin said. "Not copies. Originals with metadata. On a personal drive, all 7. And she's willing to come forward. She's in the hospital right now planning exactly how to do it," Daniel said. Kevin leaned forward. "Brooks, I want to be straight with you. I've suspected Marcus of something like this for 2 years. I reported a potential compliance issue to HR 14 months ago related to the Q3 contracts. I was told it had been reviewed and resolved." He paused. "Nobody talked to Olivia Harper." Daniel stared at him. HR knew. HR received a report. Whether they actually investigated it or whether Marcus got ahead of it, I don't know. Kevin's jaw tightened. "But I have that report. I have the date, the reference number, and the response I received. And if that response can be compared against what actually happened with Olivia's work during the same period, then HR's handling of it becomes part of the problem," Daniel said. "Which means we don't go back to HR," Kevin said. "We go above them." He was already pulling a drawer open. He took out a folder actual paper Daniel noted, not a digital file, and set it on the desk. The company's compliance structure includes an external ethics hotline administered by a third-party firm. It bypasses internal HR entirely. I've known about it for 2 years because I read the employee handbook when they updated it in 2022 and nobody else apparently did. Daniel looked at the folder. "You've been waiting for something to take to them," he said. "I've been waiting for enough to take to them," Kevin said. 7 documented cases is enough." He paused. "But it needs to come from her, directly. Her name, her testimony, her documentation. I can corroborate the Q3 and vendor renegotiation pieces from my own records, but she's the primary." "She knows," Daniel said. "She's ready." Kevin looked at him with the specific expression of someone reassessing a person they thought they understood. "You've known her what, a year," he said. "About that. And you're in the middle of this because it's wrong," Daniel said. "And because someone should be." Kevin held his gaze for a long moment. "All right," he said. "Here's what happens next. You go get whatever she needs from her desk. I'm going to pull my files this morning and cross-reference them against the project timeline you just gave me. This afternoon, I'm going to draft an initial complaint to the external compliance firm. But Brooks Marcus cannot know what we're doing. Not a word, not a hint. He is very good at getting ahead of things, and if he gets ahead of this, it disappears." "Understood," Daniel said. "And you need to go to his 11 o'clock meeting." Daniel looked at him. "You need to go," Kevin said firmly. "If you dodge it, he starts watching you. You go, you say as little as possible, you give him nothing. Can you do that?" "I fixed a $17,000 routing error last year and submitted the report without putting my name on it," Daniel said. I can say nothing. Kevin almost smiled. Yeah, you can. He closed the folder. Go get her things. Daniel was out of the office in 23 minutes. He walked to Olivia's desk with the unhurried purpose of someone running a routine errand. He was carrying his own laptop bag, which gave him a reason to stop and open a drawer. He found the charger first, exactly where she said top right drawer, and put it in the bag openly. Then he found the red case tucked behind a file folder labeled Q3 Review, exactly as she'd described, and slid it into the inside pocket of the bag, with the smooth efficiency of someone who had in fact spent 6 years being invisible in this building and knew exactly which angles were and weren't in the sightline of the security cameras. He zipped the bag. What are you doing at her desk? He turned. It was Carla, one of the junior analysts in Olivia's department. Early 30s sharp, the kind of person who asked questions not out of malice, but out of reflexive monitoring of her environment. She was looking at the bag with mild curiosity. She asked me to grab her charger, Daniel said. She's going to be working from the hospital for a couple days. Carla's expression shifted to something softer. Oh, how is she? I heard it was pretty serious. She's stable. She's going to be fine. He paused. She says to tell whoever asks that she'll have the quarterly variance report done by Thursday. Carla almost laughed. Of course she does. She shook her head. She worked herself half to death, didn't she? Something like that, Daniel said. He walked away from the desk, and the conversation, and the weight of the red case in his bag, like a man who was just going back to his desk. Linda Chen's office was on the way. Linda was executive admin to the senior leadership team, which meant she knew everything about everyone's calendar, and Olivia had been right. She'd had a complicated relationship with Marcus Reed since 2022, when Marcus had taken credit for a department restructuring that Linda had spent 4 months designing and then dressed her down in front of the team when one element of his implementation went wrong. Linda was methodical and loyal, and not remotely interested in protecting Marcus Reed's schedule from a technical operations employee who had a straightforward question about Q4 prep dates. I'm trying to coordinate a systems review around the Q4 client presentation, Daniel said. I just need to know what Marcus has locked in for the next 2 weeks so I don't step on anything. Linda looked at her screen, looked at Daniel. Something in her expression said she was deciding something. He has a call with the board liaison Thursday morning at 9, she said. He has the client pre-brief Friday at 2, and he has a one-on-one with the VP of Finance Monday the following week. She paused, looked back at her screen. The pre-brief on Friday, he submitted Olivia Harper's name as the secondary presenter last month. He hasn't updated that since she was hospitalized. Daniel kept his face completely still. He submitted her name, he said carefully, 2 weeks ago, for the regional carrier analysis section. Linda's voice was perfectly neutral. Her eyes were not. She'd be presenting work she'd done for the past quarter. Work she'd done. That Marcus had presented as collaborative when submitting the agenda. That he would stand in front of a client and present as his department's output. While Olivia was in a hospital bed recovering from a collapse, caused in large part by the sustained pressure of working herself to the point of breakdown while receiving none of the credit. Thanks, Linda, Daniel said. That's all I needed. Of course, Linda said. And then just as he was turning away, she said very quietly, I hope Olivia's doing better. She's the best analyst this department has ever had. Most people don't know that, but I do. He looked back at her. She knows you think that, he said, which wasn't true, but he was going to make sure it became true. He had exactly 11 minutes before the meeting with Marcus. He went to the men's room, ran cold water over his wrists, the way Emma had taught him to do when he needed to slow his heart rate, and looked at himself in the mirror for a long moment. How was a man in a plain work shirt with a laptop bag that contained evidence of 14 months of calculated theft, 2 anonymous threatening texts on his phone, and a meeting in 11 minutes with the man responsible for both. He thought exactly like the man everyone expected to see. Unremarkable, quiet, nothing to be concerned about. Good. He dried his hands and went to the meeting. Marcus Reed's office was the corner kind, the kind that announced itself. Floor-to-ceiling glass on 2 sides. A desk that cost more than Daniel's monthly mortgage, and the particular quality of staged tidiness that belonged to people who had assistants to manage the staging. Marcus himself was 55, silver-haired, the kind of man who had been handsome 20 years ago and had since settled into a well-maintained authority that worked the same rooms his looks used to. He wore his confidence like a tailored jacket, always fitted, always deliberate, never off. How was Standing when Daniel came in, which was a choice? Standing said, "I have somewhere to be. This is brief. You are not the priority." "Daniel," he said, "thanks for coming. Close the door." Daniel closed the door. Did not sit. Waited. "I wanted to check in about yesterday," Marcus said. His voice was warm. That was the thing about Marcus. The warmth was very good. It was the first thing you noticed and the last thing you stopped trusting. "Hell of a situation. You did a good thing getting Olivia to the hospital." "She needed help," Daniel said. "She did." Marcus nodded seriously. "She absolutely did. She's been pushing herself very hard. I've been meaning to address that with her actually. She has a tendency to overextend." He paused, letting that land, letting Daniel hear the implied message. This was Olivia's fault. Her excess. Her failure to manage herself. "How is she?" "Have you heard? She's stable, going to be fine." "Good. That's great to hear." Marcus sat down now, which was another choice now he was positioned above Daniel even by a few inches. "I wanted to touch base with you specifically. You stayed at the hospital for several hours." "I did," Daniel said. "That's admirable, really." Marcus leaned back. "I hope you got a chance to rest. It's a lot to take on." A pause. "Did you have a chance to speak with her much while you were there?" And there it was. The whole meeting in one sentence. Not concern, not gratitude. Information gathering. Marcus wanted to know what Olivia had said. What she'd told the man who'd sat by her hospital bed for 6 hours. What she might have put in motion while she was out of reach of his management. Daniel looked at him steadily. "She was pretty out of it," he said. "Mostly sleeping." Marcus nodded, and Daniel watched something almost imperceptible relax in his posture. "Of course," he said. "Of course. Well, we're all just glad she's okay." He shifted in his chair. "The Q4 client presentation is coming up fast Friday, as you may know. I'm going to need to do some reshuffling on the analytical section since Olivia won't be available. I'd imagine her recovery will take at least a week or two." "Probably," Daniel said. "We'll manage. The important thing is that she focuses on getting well." He smiled. The smile was very practiced. "I may need to pull some of your technical team for support on the systems documentation piece. Would that be a problem?" "I'd need to know the specifics," Daniel said. Of course. We'll set something up." Marcus stood, which meant the meeting was over. "Thanks for coming in, Daniel. Seriously, what you did yesterday was above and beyond. You're exactly the kind of person this company needs more of." Daniel shook his hand. "Happy to help," he said, and meant something entirely different by it. He was back at his desk by 11:23. By 11:45, he'd sent Kevin a message on the internal system confirmed pattern, still active. Friday presentation. He's planning to present her work with her out of the building. Kevin responded in under 2 minutes. Complaint drafted. I need her signature by Wednesday. Can you make that happen? Daniel responded. Yes. He left for the hospital at 4:15. He stopped at the deli on the way. The Thai place was closer, but parking was impossible, and he had the drive to deliver, and things to tell her that needed to be said while she still had the energy to process them. He got soup. 2 containers. He told himself it was practical. She was sitting up in bed when he came in, laptop open, glasses on, some kind of spreadsheet covering both screens. She looked, if anything, more alert than she'd been that morning, which told him the IV fluids were doing their job, and that Olivia Harper's baseline state was somewhere between functional and formidable. She looked up when he came in. You got it, she said. He put the bag on the tray table and took out the red case. She reached for it, held it in both hands for a second, the way you hold something you thought you might never see again. Everything okay? He said. Carla saw me at your desk, he said. I told her you asked me to get the charger. She bought it. She nodded. And Marcus? I went to the 11 o'clock. He sat down, told her all of it, the meeting, the questions Marcus had really been asking, the standing positioning, the casual mention of the Friday presentation, the smile at the end. She listened without interrupting. Her face went through several things while he talked: recognition, confirmation, something dark and tired, and when he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "He thinks he's already ahead of it," she said. "He thinks you're sidelined for 2 weeks, and I gave him nothing to worry about." "He's going to present the regional carrier analysis on Friday," she said. "That's 8 months of my work, 3 full revisions. I have every version." "I know." He paused. "Kevin needs your signature on the compliance complaint by Wednesday. Third-party firm bypasses internal HR." She looked at him. "Kevin Marsh is filing a complaint." "Kevin Marsh has been waiting for this for 2 years," Daniel said. "He has corroborating documentation on at least 2 of the 7 cases from his own records, and HR already has a complaint from him on file that they buried. That makes the pattern institutional, not just interpersonal." She was quiet, doing what she always did when presented with a complex problem, running it, checking the angles, looking for the holes. "If they stall the complaint," she said. "Then we go to the State Labor Board," he said. "Kevin knows the procedure. And if Marcus gets wind of it before Wednesday—" "He won't," Daniel said. "He thinks you're sedated, and I'm nobody." He paused. "He's been running on that assumption for a long time. We let him keep running on it for 3 more days." She looked at the drive in her hands. "There's something else on here," she said. "Something I didn't tell you this morning because I wasn't sure how much to put on you at once." She set the drive on the tray table between them. 2 of the 7 projects weren't just presented as Marcus's work internally. They were submitted to external clients as Meridian deliverables under his name. One of those clients is a federal contractor. He went very still. "A federal contractor," he said. "Yes." She held his gaze. "Which means, if Marcus submitted analytical work to a federal contractor and misrepresented its authorship as part of a billable engagement, that's not just a company HR matter." Daniel stared at her. "That's fraud," he said. "Potentially," she said carefully. "I'm not a lawyer, but yes, potentially. Which is why I've had that drive sitting in my desk drawer for 8 months, unable to decide what to do with it. Because the moment I take it beyond a company complaint, this stops being something that gets Marcus fired and starts being something that could result in federal involvement." The room was very quiet. "You've been sitting on this alone," he said. "Not an accusation, just the fact of it, which was its own weight." "I didn't know who to trust with it," she said. "I still don't entirely know. I'm trusting you with it right now, and my hands are shaking, which I'm hoping you'll pretend not to notice." He looked at her hands. They were holding the edge of the tray table with a controlled steadiness that cost something. "I'm not going to pretend not to notice," he said quietly. "Your hands are shaking, and that makes sense. What you're carrying is serious, and you've been carrying it alone, and anyone's hands would shake." He paused. "But you're not alone with it now." She looked at him. Something broke open in her face just slightly, just at the edges, the same way it had last night when he'd read the form. She blinked twice, kept her chin level. "I need a lawyer," she said. "Before we file anything. I need someone who understands federal contractor compliance, who can tell me exactly what exposure we're looking at and what the right sequence of steps is." "Do you know one?" he asked. "No, Kevin might." She thought for a moment. "There's also a woman in my MBA cohort who went into employment law. We haven't spoken in 3 years. I don't know if she'd take a call." "Call her," he said. "Tonight." "It's been 3 years, Daniel. You were in the hospital yesterday," he said. "If you call someone from your MBA cohort tonight and tell them you need help, the first thing they're going to say is that they're glad you called. That's how people work when they actually know you." He paused. "You've just spent a long time around people who didn't." She looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up her phone. He watched her scroll through her contacts, find the name. He couldn't see it from where he sat and hold the phone for a second before pressing call. He watched her take a breath. "Hey," she said into the phone. "It's Olivia Harper. I know it's been a long time. I know. Listen, I'm actually calling because I'm in a situation and I need some advice and I didn't know who else." She stopped, listened. and something in her face changed a small, genuine surprise. Yeah, I know. I heard. Congratulations. She paused. I'm okay. I was in the hospital yesterday, actually. It's fine, I'm fine, it's a long story. But listen, I have something I need to talk through with someone who understands federal contractor compliance, and I think there might be a real problem here. And it's... She listened again. Her eyes went to Daniel. Yes, I have documentation. She listened. All right, yes, tomorrow morning. She looked at Daniel and he nodded. I'll make that work. Thank you. Really, I thank you. She lowered the phone. She sat with it in her lap for a second. She's coming here tomorrow morning, she said. She said... She stopped. Started again. She said she's been doing employment and federal compliance work for 4 years, and she's been waiting for a case like this. Daniel let out a slow breath. See, he said. Olivia looked at him with an expression that was somewhere between gratitude and something more complicated, something that had the quality of a person seeing a view they'd told themselves didn't exist from a window they'd stopped opening. I keep waiting for the part where you have an angle, she said. I know, he said. Everyone has an angle. Some people don't. In my experience, Olivia, he kept his voice level. I fixed your chair because it was broken and you were compensating for it without complaining about it, and that bothered me. I left you coffee because you were going to work through the night without eating, and someone should care about that. I stayed at the hospital because you were alone, and you shouldn't have been. He looked at her steadily. None of those things had an angle. They were just things that needed doing, and I was there. She looked at him for a long time. The blood pressure machine cycled. Down the hall, a cart rattled past the door. You know what scares me most about you, she said. What? You're exactly what you appear to be, she said. There's no version underneath. There's no layer where you turn out to be something different. She shook her head slowly. That is the most disorienting thing I have encountered in 34 years. He almost smiled. That's a strange thing to be scared of. I know. She set the phone on the tray table next to the drive. I'm working on it. He opened the bag, set the soup on the table. She looked at it. You stopped again, she said. Eat, he said. I had a hospital dinner. I saw the hospital dinner when I walked past the tray cart. Eat. She picked up the soup. They ate in the kind of quiet that has warmth in it, not the quiet of people who have nothing to say, but the quiet of people who have said enough for now and are simply together in the space that creates. Outside Atlanta did its evening thing, the slow drain of daylight, the particular quality of noise that came through hospital windows muffled and distant. His phone buzzed twice. He checked it once, Mrs. Paulson confirming Lily was fed and doing her homework, and put it away. I was aware in the way. He was always aware of the important things that he didn't let himself examine too directly, that he was sitting in a hospital room at 6:15 in the evening with a woman he'd been orbiting for 14 months, eating soup in comfortable silence, and that this felt more like home than most of the places he'd been in 4 years. He didn't examine that directly, but he didn't push it away either. The texts, she said suddenly. He looked up. You were going to tell me something else. I can see it. Her eyes were precise as always, even through the hospital pallor and the traces of the headache she was clearly still managing. What are you not telling me? He took out his phone, found the screenshots, passed it across to her. She read both messages, read them again, set the phone down carefully. Someone in that building knows you're helping me, she said. Yes. And they want you scared enough to back off. Yes. Are you? No. She looked at the phone, then at him. This is Marcus. Probably, he said. Or someone working for Marcus. The number was a burner I checked. He got ahead of it that fast, she said, and it was less a surprise than a confirmation of something she'd known for a long time about how this man operated. Which means someone on that floor told him you went to the hospital last night. He was watching already. Linda Chen told me he called you at 8:47 yesterday morning, Daniel said. The paramedics left at 9:15. He was already managing the situation before you were stable. She set the phone down on the tray table between them. He's going to escalate, she said. When the texts don't work, he doesn't like loose ends, and right now you are the loosest end he's ever had, because you're not someone he can manage with a reference or a performance review. She looked at him. He can't touch your career the way he touched mine, because you're not in his department and your documentation record is clean, so he's going to try something else. What? Daniel said. She thought for a moment. Her eyes went somewhere focused and distant, the way they did when she was working through a problem. He's going to try to make this personal, she said quietly. He's going to find something about you that he can use, and if he can't find anything... She stopped. He'll make something up, Daniel said. She met his eyes. Yes, she said. He will. They sat with that for a moment, the weight of it settling into the room, the specific weight of knowing that the person you're up against is not going to fight fair, and deciding that it doesn't change anything. Wednesday, Daniel said. 3 days. If we can get everything to Kevin and your lawyer friend by Wednesday, the complaint goes in before Marcus has time to build whatever narrative he's building. We need to be faster than him, she said. We will be, he said, because he thinks we're not ready, and because he's never in his life underestimated someone correctly. She looked at him. He underestimated me for 14 months, she said. And look how that turned out, Daniel said. You have 7 ironclad cases on a red drive and a federal contractor angle he doesn't know you know about. She was quiet for a second, and then very quietly, more to herself than to him, she said, Yeah, I do. He picked up his jacket. I'll be here by 8 tomorrow, he said. Before your lawyer gets here, we're going to need to go through everything on that drive together tonight. Can you start? I've already started, she said. I've been going through it since you left this morning. He looked at her. She looked back at him with the level, unapologetic gaze of someone who had spent 14 months waiting for the moment when their preparation would mean something. Go home to Lily, she said. Come back at 8. And Daniel. He stopped at the door. Thank you, she said. Not for today specifically, for all of it. For the chair and the coffee and the form and all of it. She held his gaze. I mean that. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow, we take him apart. He walked out into the hospital corridor, past the nurse's station, past the waiting room where he'd spent 2 hours and 17 minutes the day before, through the automatic doors and into the Atlanta night. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. 1 word. Stop. He didn't stop. He kept walking. He got home at 7:43 and Lily was still awake. She was supposed to be in bed by 7:30, a rule she treated as a general suggestion rather than a firm boundary. And when he came through the door, she was sitting at the kitchen table in her dinosaur pajamas, with a math worksheet and the focused expression of someone who was absolutely not going to mention that bedtime had passed 20 minutes ago. He stood in the doorway and looked at her. Hey, Bug. Hey, Daddy. She didn't look up. Mrs. Paulson made spaghetti. I see that. There was a plate covered in foil on the counter. He hadn't eaten since the soup at the hospital, and his body registered the smell with embarrassing urgency. You finish your homework. Almost. She chewed her pencil. What's 9 times 7? 63. Are you sure? I'm sure. She wrote it down, with the deliberate concentration of someone committing a suspicious fact to record. He sat across from her and pulled the foil off the plate and ate standing at the counter because sitting felt like it would take longer and he needed to think. He needed to think about the texts. About Marcus. About the federal contractor angle Olivia had laid out in that hospital room like a card she'd been holding face down for 8 months. About Wednesday, and whether 3 days was enough time to build something solid enough that Marcus couldn't dismantle it before it reached anyone who mattered. Daddy, Lily said. Yeah. Is your friend okay? Mrs. Paulson said you took someone to the hospital. He set the fork down. Looked at his daughter, who was 7 years old, and had her mother's eyes and her mother's habit of asking the exact question you weren't prepared for. She's going to be okay, he said. She's getting better. Lily considered this with the gravity she applied to most things. Is she nice? He thought about Olivia handing him his own words back. About the grant application. About the way she'd said your hands are shaking, and I'm hoping you'll pretend not to notice like she was embarrassed by her own humanity." "Yeah," he said. "She's very nice. She's also very stubborn, which is a different thing." Lily nodded like this tracked. "Like you," she said. He looked at her. "Go to bed," he said. She gathered her worksheet with the unhurried dignity of someone who knew she'd scored a point and was choosing not to press it. She came around the table, hugged him hard around the middle, and said into his shirt, "I'm glad your friend is okay." He put his hand on the back of her head. "Me too, Bug," he said. "Me too." After she was in bed and the apartment was quiet, he sat at the kitchen table with his phone and the 2 screenshots and a yellow legal pad he used for working through complex technical problems, and he wrote down everything he knew in the order he knew it. He wrote for an hour and 40 minutes. When he was done, the legal pad had 4 pages of notes and one conclusion at the bottom of the last page underlined twice. "Marcus knows we're moving. He's going to act before Wednesday if we let him set the pace. We can't let him set the pace." He went to bed at 11:15. He was back at the hospital at 7:58. Olivia was already dressed, which meant she'd convinced a nurse to let her shower, and she had the red drive open on the laptop and a legal pad of her own covered in handwriting that made his look sparse. Her lawyer, the woman from her MBA cohort, whose name was Diana Walsh, and who arrived at 8:23 in a gray blazer with the focused energy of someone who had cleared her morning. For exactly this, sat in the other chair and spent 40 minutes going through the drive, while Olivia walked her through each case with the systematic precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment without knowing she was rehearsing for it. Daniel sat near the window and listened and said nothing. Diana asked good questions. Sharp, the kind that probed for weakness, not to undermine, but to find it before Marcus could. She asked about chain of custody on the originals. She asked about the metadata integrity. She asked about the federal contractor engagement specifically, which firm, which contract, which deliverable, which billing period. Olivia answered every question without hesitation. Diana sat back at 9:15 and looked at the drive and then at Olivia and said, "You know what you have, right? I have 7 documented cases of intellectual property misappropriation within a corporate structure," Olivia said carefully. "You have 7 documented cases," Diana said, "plus a potential False Claims Act violation if the federal contractor billing can be tied to the misrepresented authorship. That's not just an employment matter. That's a federal whistleblower situation." She paused. "Which means you have protections I want you to understand before we file anything." Olivia looked at Daniel. He looked back at her. Diana continued, "Federal whistleblower protections under the False Claims Act mean that if Marcus retaliates against you after a complaint is filed, terminates you, demotes you, creates a hostile environment, he and the company are exposed to additional federal liability. The retaliation itself becomes an actionable offense." She tapped the legal pad. "He doesn't know you know about the federal contractor piece, which means right now he's planning his response to an internal HR complaint. He's not planning his response to a federal disclosure. He's going to figure it out when the complaint is filed," Daniel said from the window. Diana looked at him. "You're the coworker who caught her." "Yes." "Are you planning to be involved in this formally, as a corroborating witness?" He thought about Lily at the kitchen table, about his mortgage, about his job in technical operations that he needed to keep, and that Marcus Reed had no formal jurisdiction over, but plenty of informal reach toward. "Whatever she needs," he said. Diana looked at him for another moment, then back at Olivia. "You're lucky," she said simply. Olivia looked at the window. "I know," she said quietly. The plan that emerged over the next 90 minutes was more aggressive than Daniel had expected, and more precisely engineered than he should have been surprised by, given the 2 women building it. Diana would file a dual complaint simultaneously to the company's external ethics firm as Kevin had planned, and to the relevant federal oversight body for the contractor engagement. The dual filing meant Marcus couldn't contain it within the company structure. The moment the federal piece landed, it was outside anyone at Meridian's ability to manage or suppress. Kevin would file his corroborating documentation through the internal compliance channel at the same time, not before, not after simultaneously. so that the company's first awareness of the problem came from three directions at once, none of which could be individually neutralized. And Olivia would send one email to the chief people officer, not Marcus, not HR, not the VP of Finance, copied to the board's independent ethics committee chair, whose contact information was in the company bylaws that Olivia had read in her second week and memorized because she read every document she was given with the thoroughness of someone who knew the day might come when she'd need it. The email would be sent Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. It would contain her formal notification that she had filed external complaints and that she was available to cooperate fully with any investigation. It would be 3 sentences. Diana drafted it in 12 minutes. At 10:47, Daniel's phone rang. It was Kevin. He stepped into the hallway to take it. "We have a problem," Kevin said. His voice was level in the way that meant something had gone wrong, and he was managing how he communicated it. Marcus requested access to Olivia's departmental files this morning. He went through Sandra in HR. He said it was for continuity purposes while she's out. Daniel's hand tightened on the phone. Her work files, the shared drive, the departmental project folders, everything she's contributed to since she joined. Kevin paused. "He's looking for something. I don't know if he's trying to preemptively restructure the attribution on the existing files, or if he's looking for evidence that she's been copying files, but either way, he's moving." "Can you block it?" "I can raise a compliance flag on the access request which slows it down by 24 to 48 hours. I'd need a reason." "Data integrity review," Daniel said immediately. "Tell them you're running a quarterly audit on the analytics department's file structure, and you need all shared drives locked from modification until it's complete. That's a legitimate technical operations request." A pause. "Can you actually run that?" "I can generate the paperwork for it in about 30 minutes, Daniel said. "It won't be a fake request. I'll actually run the audit. It just serves 2 purposes. "Do it," Kevin said. "Fast." He put the access request in at 9 this morning. It's going to be approved by end of day if we don't move. "I'm on it in 20 minutes, Daniel said. "Kevin, how did you find out about the access request?" "Linda Chen called me," Kevin said. "She processes all departmental access requests that come through Sandra. She wanted me to know." Daniel thought about Linda Chen at her desk, the quiet way she'd said she's the best analyst this department has ever had. "Most people don't know that, but I do." "Tell her thank you," Daniel said. "Already did." He went back into the room. He told Olivia and Diana what Kevin had said. He watched Olivia's jaw tighten and her eyes go to a hard, focused point, and he watched her make the decision in real time, not with anger, but with the cold, clarifying fury of someone who has spent 14 months being patient and has just been handed the confirmation that patience is no longer the strategy. "He's trying to alter the record," she said. "Yes," Daniel said. "He thinks I'm here," she said, touching the hospital bed and not paying attention. "Yes." She looked at Diana. "Move the filing to tomorrow morning," she said. "Tuesday, not Wednesday." Diana looked at her for a second. "That's aggressive." "He's aggressive," Olivia said. "We match it." She looked at Daniel. "Can Kevin hold the file access until tomorrow morning?" "I can buy us until end of day today with the audit request," he said. "Tomorrow morning he might push through. Then we file before he gets into the office," Olivia said. 7 a.m., all 3 simultaneously. My email, Kevin's complaint. Diana's federal disclosure. She looked at Diana. "Can you have the federal filing ready by 7 a.m. tomorrow?" Diana was already opening her laptop. "I'll have it ready by midnight," she said. At 11:30, a doctor came in to tell Olivia that her blood pressure had stabilized and she could be discharged that afternoon. She said, "Give me 2 more hours." The doctor looked at the laptop, the legal pads, the woman in the gray blazer typing at speed, and the man near the window on his phone running what appeared to be a file audit, and she said, 2 hours, and left without further comment. Daniel filed the audit request from his phone at 11:43. Kevin confirmed receipt and flagged it to IT compliance at 11:50. By noon, the shared drive was locked. Marcus, somewhere in his corner office, had just run into a wall he didn't see coming. Daniel imagined the moment. Marcus's assistant calling IT. IT explaining that there was an active compliance audit on the analytics file structure. Marcus asking who initiated it. Being told, technical operations. And Marcus sitting in his chair recalculating because technical operations meant Daniel Brooks and Daniel Brooks was supposed to be nobody. His phone buzzed at 12:17. Unknown number again. But this time, it wasn't one word. It was a paragraph. You don't know what you're getting into. She has a history of making false accusations against supervisors. She did it at her last company, and she'll do it to you next. Ask her about what happened at Crawford and Associates. Ask her why she really left. You think you know her. You don't. He read it twice. Then he took a screenshot, sent it to his personal email, walked back into the room, and handed the phone to Olivia. She read it. Her face was very still. Crawford and Associates, she said. You don't have to tell me, he said. I know I don't. She set the phone down carefully. She looked at the window for a long moment. It's what I told you in the hospital. My previous company. The VP who used my work, the report I filed, the committee that was stacked in his favor, the way I was managed out. She paused. The official record from that situation is that I resigned voluntarily following a period of performance concerns. That's what my HR file says. That's what any reference check would find. She turned to look at him. What actually happened is that I filed a formal complaint against my direct supervisor for intellectual property misappropriation and was told the investigation found no evidence of wrongdoing, and 3 weeks later I was placed on a performance improvement plan for the first time in my career and given 90 days and then told at the end of the 90 days that my position was being eliminated. The room was very quiet. Marcus knows this, Daniel said. Yes. How? I don't know for certain, she said. But the VP at Crawford, his name is Raymond Holt, and Marcus Reed have overlapping professional networks. They've presented at the same logistics industry conferences. They've been photographed at the same events. She looked at the phone. I think Raymond told him. I think Marcus hired me knowing exactly what happened because someone who'd been burned once and documented once and managed out once for doing the right thing is a very useful kind of person to have on staff. Compliant, afraid, productive. The fury that moved through Daniel in that moment was clean and absolute. Not hot. It didn't come with raised voice or visible agitation. It came like a current, low and constant, the kind that doesn't make noise but can run a city. He said nothing for a moment. Diana had stopped typing. This is actually useful, Diana said carefully. Both of them looked at her. If Raymond Holt shared Olivia's confidential HR record with Marcus Reed, which is what the timeline suggests, that's a breach of confidentiality that Crawford and Associates is liable for, she said. And if Marcus used that information as a basis for how he treated Olivia at Meridian, that's discriminatory hiring practice layered on top of the misappropriation. She was already typing again. I want to add this to the federal disclosure. It establishes a pattern that predates her time at Meridian, which speaks to the deliberateness of what Marcus did. Olivia looked at the phone one more time. He thought that would scare me, she said. Did it? Daniel asked. She handed him back his phone. It made me angry, she said. Which is better? He nodded. Good, he said. He left the hospital at 2 o'clock to go back to the office because being absent for a full second day would register in a building that was now paying attention to him in ways it hadn't 2 days ago. He moved through the afternoon with the same unremarkable steadiness he always had. Fixed a server connectivity issue in the second-floor annex, attended a routing call at 3, said nothing remarkable to anyone. At 4:15, Kevin appeared at his desk. He didn't sit down. He stood in the way that meant he had something to say that he didn't want to say loudly. Marcus called a department head meeting for tomorrow morning, Kevin said quietly. 8 a.m. Daniel looked up. About what? The stated purpose is Q4 presentation coordination. Kevin's voice was flat. The real purpose is to get in front of whatever he thinks is coming. He's going to present his version of the last 14 months before anyone else can present theirs. He paused. He's also, and I'm getting this from Linda, he's been making calls this afternoon, to board members. Individual calls. Off the official schedule. Daniel kept his expression neutral. He's building his defense, Daniel said. He's building his offense, Kevin said. There's a difference. He's not defending yet because he doesn't know exactly what we have. He's trying to establish his credibility with the board before whatever lands on their desk. Kevin leaned slightly forward. We need to move tonight, not 7 a.m. tonight. Daniel looked at him. Diana's filing isn't ready until midnight, he said. Then we file at midnight, Kevin said. The ethics firm has a 24-hour submission portal. The federal disclosure goes through an online system that accepts submissions at any time. Olivia's email can go out at midnight. If Marcus is making board calls this afternoon by tomorrow morning, some of those board members are going to have a preconceived frame for whatever they hear. We need our version in their hands before they sleep. Daniel was already on his phone calling Olivia. She picked up on the second ring. Kevin says we move tonight, he said. Midnight. All three filing simultaneously. A pause. Is Diana's filing ready? She said midnight. Then midnight works. She paused. I'm being discharged at 5. I'll be home by 6. Another pause. Daniel, you should be with your daughter tonight. You don't need to. What's your address? He said. Silence. Olivia, what's your address? She gave it to him. He picked her up from the hospital at 5:20 in his truck, which he'd had for 9 years, and which had a passenger seat that was excellent for transporting legal pads, laptops, and the red drive in its case. She came through the automatic doors in her own clothes, the blazer, the professional armor fully reassembled, and she looked, he thought, like someone who had decided something fundamental about themselves in the past 48 hours, and the decision showed in the way she held herself. She got in. He drove. How are you feeling? He said. Functional, she said. Better than yesterday. She looked at the road. Scared? She said, quieter. That's normal, he said. I know it is. It doesn't make it more comfortable. She held the laptop bag on her lap with both hands. If this doesn't work. If it doesn't work, Diana escalates to the federal level, and Marcus spends the next 6 months in depositions, he said. Either way, he stops. Either way, it's on record. I could still lose my job. You could, he said honestly. If Meridian decides to protect him despite the federal exposure, they might try to push you out. He paused. But they'd be doing it with a federal whistleblower flag on your file, which means any retaliation becomes additional liability. The math doesn't work in their favor. She was quiet for a moment. And if I lose my job, she said carefully, I have a federal wrongful termination claim, a whistleblower retaliation claim, and 14 months of documented misappropriation that will be very interesting to any opposing counsel who wants to depose the board of a company that let this happen. She was doing what she always did, running the problem, finding the structure in it, mapping the angles. Diana said the same thing. Diana's good, he said. She's excellent, Olivia said. I should have called her 8 months ago. He didn't say anything. I know, she said. I know. I needed someone to trust first. He pulled up to her apartment building at 6:05. She directed him to park in the guest space on the second level, and they went up together, her with the laptop bag, and him with the drive and the 2 legal pads and a bag from the pharmacy she'd asked him to stop at on the way, which contained her prescription migraine medication and a bottle of water. And on his own addition, a sleeve of those cookies she'd mentioned once in an offhand way during the late-night working session 3 weeks ago that he shouldn't have remembered but did. She saw the cookies when he set the pharmacy bag on her kitchen counter, and she looked at them for a second, and then looked at him with an expression he couldn't entirely decode, except that it had something real in it. You remembered that, she said. You mentioned them once, he said. She looked back at the cookies. Daniel. Don't, he said gently. Just eat one and get your laptop open. We have work to do. She ate one. She got her laptop open. She called Diana, who had the federal filing 80% complete and needed 20 minutes more, and another pass through the Q4 contractor billing documentation. Olivia walked her through it on the phone, while Daniel read Kevin's corroborating complaint on his own laptop and checked it against the timeline on the legal pad looking for gaps. He found one. At 7:43, he called Kevin. The Q3 vendor renegotiation, he said. Your complaint cites the presentation date as March 14th. Olivia's original file is dated February 28th. But there's no documentation of when Marcus received the original from her. Does she have an email? Kevin said. He looked across the kitchen counter at Olivia, who was still on the phone with Diana. He waited for a pause. Q3 vendor renegotiation. Do you have an email showing when you sent it to Marcus? She looked at him. Something shifted in her face. She held up one finger to Diana, opened a new window typed for 30 seconds, and turned the laptop to face him. The email was from February 22nd. Olivia to Marcus. Subject line, Q3 vendor analysis. Final draft for review. Attachment. Marcus had replied at 11:47 the same night. Got it. Good work. His reply was 2 words. His presentation to the board had been 3 weeks later. Her name on none of it. 2 words. Good work. We have it, Daniel told Kevin. February 22nd. He replied personally. Send it to me, Kevin said. That's the chain of custody piece I was missing. That locks the Q3 case completely. A pause. Brooks, this is solid. This is genuinely solid. I know, Daniel said. He forwarded the email. He watched Olivia finish her call with Diana and set her phone down and look at the ceiling for a moment, with the expression of someone who has just handed a very heavy thing to someone qualified to carry it and is feeling the absence of the weight. She's filing at midnight, Olivia said. Kevin's ready, Daniel said. The Q3 chain of custody is complete. She looked at him. How did you find that? The date gap in the timeline, he said. February 22nd to March 14th is 20 days, long enough for him to rebuild the presentation around your work. I wanted to know if there was documentation of the handoff. She stared at him. You read Kevin's complaint tonight, she said. The whole thing, looking for gaps. That's what I do, he said simply. I find the things that are about to break before they break. She held his gaze for a long moment. I know, she said. I know that's what you do. She looked at the laptop at the email chain still open on the screen. You've been doing it for 14 months, and I've been too scared to let you do it for me until now. You're letting me now, he said. Yes, she said. I am. They worked until 11:30. At 11:58, Diana sent the confirmation that the federal disclosure had been submitted. At 11:59, Kevin sent confirmation that the ethics firm complaint had been filed. At midnight exactly, Olivia sent the email to the chief people officer and the board's ethics committee chair. 3 sentences. 3 directions. Simultaneously. She set her phone on the counter and looked at it. Daniel sat across from her at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet. The city outside was doing its late-night thing, distant, muffled, indifferent. It's done, she said. It's done, he agreed. She let out a breath that had been held for he suspected much longer than tonight. He's going to know by morning, she said. Yes. He's going to come at us. Let him, Daniel said. He's going to be coming at a federal whistleblower with documented evidence, a corroborating witness with 11 years of institutional knowledge, and a lawyer who sounded very much like she's been waiting for exactly this case. He paused. He's been running on the assumption that you'd always be alone in this. He doesn't know how to fight what he can't isolate. She looked at him across the table. Daniel, she said. Her voice was different, not the controlled version, not the professional version. Just her voice, the one underneath both of those. What happens now after this, with us? He looked at his hands on the table for a moment. He thought about Emma. About the deal he'd made with himself the morning after the funeral. About Lily's crayon drawing with the yellow sun bigger than the house. About 14 months of coffee and fixed chairs and grant applications and a name on an emergency contact form written in careful, precise handwriting. I don't know exactly, he said honestly, but I know I'm not going anywhere. She held that. I'm not easy, she said. I need you to understand that going in. I overwork. I pull back when I should lean in. I'm better at strategy than I am at trust, and I've been alone for a long time and I don't... She stopped. I don't know how to be someone people stay for. I've mostly been someone people leave." "I know," he said. "You can't possibly know that yet." "I know enough," he said. "And I'm a patient man." He looked at her steadily. "I fixed your chair in October. You didn't notice until you sat down. You didn't say thank you until February. I was still there in March." He paused. "I'm going to keep being there." She was quiet for a long moment. Her phone buzzed on the counter. They both looked at it. Unknown number. One message. She picked it up, read it, set it back down. He waited. "What does it say?" he asked. She turned it to face him. "You made a mistake, both of you." He read it, put the phone down, looked at her. "No," he said quietly. "We didn't." She held his gaze across the kitchen table in the quiet of her apartment at 12:17 in the morning, with the filings already in the hands of people who could not be called off by Marcus Reed, or managed by Sandra from HR, or suppressed by anyone sitting in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling glass. And she said, "No, we didn't." His phone buzzed. He looked at it. A text from a number he recognized this time. "Kevin." 3 words. "Check your email." He opened it. There was a message from an address he didn't recognize, a personal Gmail, not a work account, sent 11 minutes ago at 12:06. The subject line was blank. The message was 4 sentences. "My name is Raymond Holt. I was VP of Operations at Crawford & Associates until 2023. I heard what you filed tonight. I'd like to talk about what Marcus Reed knew and when he knew it." Daniel read it twice. Then he looked up at Olivia. She was watching his face. "What?" she said. He turned the phone around. She read it. He watched the moment it landed, watched her face go through shock, then recognition, then something he hadn't seen in her before. Not hope exactly. Something more fundamental than hope. The specific expression of a person who spent a long time believing they were fighting alone and just discovered the fight was bigger than they knew and other people had been in it longer. "Raymond Holt," she said. "Apparently he's been watching Marcus too," Daniel said. She set the phone on the table between them. "This isn't just about me," she said slowly. "No," he said. "It probably never was." She sat with that for a long moment. The city hummed outside. The apartment was warm and quiet, and the legal pads and the empty coffee cups and the laptop with the email chain still open on the screen made the table look like what it was. The surface where 2 people had built something careful and solid in the hours before the storm. "What do we do with Raymond Holt?" she said. Daniel thought for a moment. "You forward his email to Diana tonight," he said. "And then you get some sleep, because tomorrow morning, Marcus Reed is going to walk into his corner office and find out that the ground he's been standing on for 14 months just opened up under his feet. And you're going to want to be rested for that." She looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up the phone, forwarded the email to Diana, and put it face down on the table. "Okay," she said. He stood up, picked up his jacket. "Lock the door," he said. "I'll call you at 7. "Daniel." He stopped. She was looking at the table, at the legal pads, at the red drive sitting between them, like the document of a year of her life that was finally going to mean what it should have meant from the beginning. "Thank you," she said. "Not the careful thank you, not the managed one. For all of this. For not letting me do it alone." He stood there for a moment. "You would have found a way," he said. "You always would have found a way. You're the smartest person in that building, and you've always been the smartest person in that building." He paused. "You just needed someone in your corner who wasn't afraid of Marcus Reed." "Why aren't you afraid of him?" "Him?" she asked. He thought about it honestly. "Because I've already lost the most important thing I'm ever going to lose," he said. "Everything else is just math." He picked up the jacket. "Get some sleep." He drove home through the Atlanta night with both hands on the wheel and something he hadn't felt in 4 years sitting quietly in his chest. Not happiness exactly. Not yet. It was too early and too complicated for that. But the specific feeling of being oriented. Of knowing which direction was forward and moving in it. His phone sat quiet in the cup holder, the whole drive home. No texts, no threats, no one-word warnings from unknown numbers. Marcus, he suspected, was having a very different kind of night. He pulled into his parking space at 1:15 a.m., sat for a moment, looked at his phone. Then he texted Kevin. Raymond Holt reached out, forwarded to Diana. How many people did Marcus do this to? Kevin responded in 3 minutes, which meant Kevin was also awake, which meant Kevin had seen the email too. I've been making calls since 10 tonight. I think we're about to find out the answer is more than either of us expected. Daniel set the phone in his pocket, got out of the car, went upstairs to his apartment, checked on Lily dinosaur pajamas, one sock on, deeply peacefully asleep, and stood in the hallway for a moment. Then he went to his bedroom, looked at the ceiling, the water stain. He thought about Olivia's table covered in legal pads, about Raymond Holt's 4-sentence email, about the ethics firm and the federal disclosure portal, and Kevin's corroborating complaint, and 3 simultaneous filings going out at midnight like a signal flare. Nobody in that corner office had seen coming. He thought about a woman who had spent 14 months being the name on no one's form. She was the name on his form now. He closed his eyes. He was asleep in 8 minutes, which was a record for the past 4 years, and he didn't wake up until his alarm went off at 5:15. His alarm went off at 5:15, and he was already awake. He'd been lying there for 20 minutes, running the day forward in his mind, the way he used to run technical problems, systematically looking for the points of failure before they became actual failures. Today had more variables than a routing system. Today had Marcus Reed walking into his office and discovering that the ground had been removed while he was sleeping. Daniel got up, made pancakes, not because it was a pancake day by the established rule, but because Lily came padding into the kitchen at 5:45, with her hair sideways and her dinosaur pajamas, and a look on her face that said she could tell something was happening, even if she didn't know what. And pancakes were the language he used when he wanted her to know that whatever was happening, she was safe. She ate 3 of them without asking questions. He loved her so much, it was almost a physical thing. "You're going to Mrs. Paulson's after school today," he said. "I might be late." She looked at him over her orange juice. "Is your friend okay?" "She's going to be better than okay," he said. "Today's an important day for her." Lily considered this. "Is it like when you fixed the big broken thing at work and you were nervous before, but then it worked?" He looked at his daughter. "Yeah," he said. "It's exactly like that." She nodded with the gravity of someone who understood important days and went back to her pancakes. He dropped her at school at 7:10 and was on the phone with Kevin by 7:15. "He's already in the building," Kevin said. "Sandra texted me. He came in at 6:30. 6:30. Marcus never came in before 8. The filing had landed, and he'd felt it before sunrise. "Has anyone from the ethics firm contacted the company yet?" Daniel said. "I got a confirmation email at 6:47 that the complaint had been received and assigned a case number," Kevin said. "Standard procedure is that they notify the company's designated compliance officer within 4 business hours. That's by 10:47 this morning." A pause. "Marcus is going to know the official source by 11 at the latest. And the federal disclosure. Diana texted me at 6. She got a submission confirmation last night. Federal acknowledgement typically comes within 24 to 48 hours, but the relevant oversight office received it. It's in the system. It can't be recalled." Kevin's voice had something in it that Daniel recognized as the specific satisfaction of a methodical man who has finally gotten the sequence right. "It's done, Brooks. Whatever Marcus does today, it's done." Daniel exhaled slowly. "How's he going to play it?" "He's going to call it a misunderstanding," Kevin said without hesitation. "He's going to say it was always collaborative work, that Olivia's contributions were understood internally, that the way it was presented externally was a miscommunication of credit, not an intentional misrepresentation. He's going to be very reasonable, and very concerned, and very focused on resolution." Kevin paused. "And it's not going to matter, because the metadata on those files says what it says, and Raymond Holt's testimony says what it says, and none of Marcus's reasonableness can touch any of it." "What are you doing this morning?" Daniel said. "I am going to the 8 a.m. department head meeting," Kevin said. "And I am going to sit in that room and say absolutely nothing, because everything I have to say is already in the complaint. and I am not going to give Marcus the opportunity to characterize anything I say today as disgruntled insubordination. A beat. I'd suggest you stay away from that meeting entirely. I wasn't invited. Good, Kevin said. Stay uninvited. He called Olivia at 7:30. She picked up immediately. He's in early, he said. I know, she said. Diana called me at 6. She also told me Raymond Holt responded to her last night. A pause. He's willing to provide a formal statement. He says Marcus called him in late 2022 and asked specifically about me, about what happened at Crawford, about whether I had documentation of my complaints. Her voice was steady, controlled in the way it got when the information was significant, and she was managing how she delivered it. Raymond says he told Marcus almost nothing. He said he realized within 5 minutes what Marcus was trying to do, and he ended the call. But he also said he's been carrying guilt about that conversation ever since, because he always suspected Marcus used what little he'd said to position himself with me. She stopped. He wants to make it right, too. Daniel sat with that for a moment. The thing about Marcus was that he was smart enough to use people, and not quite smart enough to understand that the people he used kept records of being used. Diana's getting his statement today, Daniel said. This morning, she's driving to meet him. A pause. Daniel, if Raymond's statement corroborates the timeline, if Marcus knew about Crawford before he hired me and structured my position specifically to exploit what happened there, that's not just misappropriation anymore. That's predatory hiring practice. That's a pattern of behavior that extends beyond Meridian. I know, he said. That changes the scope of this significantly. I know, he said again. Are you okay with that? Silence for a moment. Yes, she said. And then more quietly, yes. Because if he did it to me, he did it to someone before me. And he would have done it to someone after me. Her voice was clear and certain in the way it got when she'd run the problem all the way to its end. I'm not doing this just for me anymore. I think I need to say that out loud. I heard it, he said. Kevin heard it through the filings. Diana heard it. Raymond Holt heard it when he picked up the phone last night. He paused. You're not alone in this, Olivia. You haven't been alone in it since Tuesday morning. She was quiet for a second. Come to my apartment at noon, she said. Diana will be back by then. We need to talk through how to handle whatever Marcus does at that meeting this morning. I'll be there, he said. I went into the office at 8 o'clock and sat at his desk and did his job, which was what he always did, which was what nobody had ever expected to be a radical act, and which had somehow become one. He ran the audit he'd initiated the day before the real one, not just the paperwork, because he'd told Kevin he would, and because his integrity was not situational. He documented 3 minor inefficiencies in the file structure and submitted a clean report to IT by 10 o'clock. At 10:17, his phone buzzed. It was Sandra from HR. Can you come to my office? He looked at the message for a moment. Then he typed back, give me 10 minutes. He texted Kevin first. Sandra just called me in. Kevin responded in 40 seconds. Don't go without knowing why. Ask her what it's regarding before you go. He texted Sandra. What's this regarding? 3 minutes passed. Then Marcus has asked to speak with you. I'm facilitating. He stared at that. Marcus had bypassed. Kevin, bypassed department protocol, gone directly to HR, and was using Sandra to summon him like a piece on a board. He texted Kevin, Marcus is using Sandra to get me in a room. Kevin, do not go alone. I'm coming with you as your department supervisor. Tell Sandra we'll be there in 15. He texted Sandra. I'll be there in 15. My supervisor, Kevin Marsh, will be joining as this involves a cross-departmental matter. There was a longer pause this time. Then understood. He imagined Marcus on the other side of that exchange, receiving the information that Daniel Brooks was not walking into that room alone. He imagined the recalculation. Kevin appeared at his desk in 12 minutes. You ready? Kevin said. What's he going to do? Daniel said quietly. He's going to try to make you the problem, Kevin said. He's going to say you've been interfering in departmental matters, that you've been having inappropriate private communications with Olivia, that whatever she's filed is a product of your influence rather than her experience. He's going to try to make this about you and her, not about him, and 14 months of documented theft. He paused. Don't take the bait. Don't argue with his characterization. Answer only what is directly asked and say nothing he can use. Understood, Daniel said. They walked to Sandra's office together. Marcus was already there. How was standing the same choice he'd made in his own office 2 days ago. The standing that said, I have somewhere to be. And he was wearing the controlled expression of a man who had practiced looking reasonable under pressure and was very good at it. Sandra sat behind her desk, with the expression of someone who had been placed in the middle of something she hadn't signed up for, and was managing it by being professionally invisible. Daniel, Marcus said warmly. Thanks for coming. Kevin, I wasn't expecting you. Brooks is in my department, Kevin said pleasantly. I like to be present when my team is called to meetings. Something shifted behind Marcus's eyes. Almost nothing. Almost invisible. Daniel caught it because he'd been watching Marcus for 2 days now, and he knew what composed looked like when it was working hard. Of course, Marcus said. This is informal. I just wanted to check in with Daniel directly. He looked at Daniel. I understand you've been spending a lot of time with Olivia over the past few days, at the hospital, at her apartment last night. He said it carefully, not accusatory, just informational, just positioning. Daniel looked at him. She was in the hospital, Daniel said. Yes, of course. And that's admirable truly. You went above and beyond. Marcus's voice was warm. The warmth was excellent. I'm just a little concerned, Daniel. Olivia is a valued member of this team, and she's clearly been under a lot of stress, and I want to make sure that the support she's receiving is healthy. That decisions she might be making right now are coming from a clear-headed place. He paused, perfectly calibrated. Has she said anything to you about her plans, about coming back to work? There it was. He was asking if Daniel knew about the filings. He was asking what Olivia had told him. He was asking in the most reasonable possible voice whether Daniel was the instrument through which this had been organized so that he could frame it that way. Daniel looked at Marcus Reed for a long moment. He thought about Lily at the kitchen table, asking if his friend was okay. He thought about Emma saying the whole point of being capable of something is that you do it when it's needed. He thought about a red drive in a hospital room and a woman who had been carrying proof for 8 months and needed one person to trust before she could use it. Olivia makes her own decisions, Daniel said. She always has. That's something you should have understood a long time ago. The room went very still. Marcus's warmth didn't break, but something underneath it shifted. Something that recognized it had just been read correctly by someone it had underestimated. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Marcus said. I think you are, Daniel said. Kevin said nothing. He didn't need to. Sandra was looking at her desk. Marcus looked at Daniel for a long moment. Then he said, still warm, still controlled. I hope you understand that getting involved in matters that are above your pay grade can have consequences for people's careers, even people with good intentions. There it was again. The threat. Dressed up in concern. Daniel nodded slowly. I appreciate the advice, he said. Is there anything else? A beat. No, Marcus said. That's all. Daniel and Kevin walked out. In the hallway, Kevin said quietly, You did well. He recorded that conversation, Daniel said. Or Sandra did on his instruction. I know, Kevin said. So did I. He held up his phone. Audio app, running the whole time. If he uses any part of that conversation to build a case against you, we have the full context. Daniel looked at him. You've been doing this longer than I have, he said. 11 years, Kevin said. I've been waiting for the right moment for 11 years. He put the phone in his pocket. Go to Olivia's at noon. I'll hold the fort here. He was at Olivia's apartment at 12:03. Diana was already there, back from her meeting with Raymond Holt laptop, opened the kind of charged, focused energy in the room that comes when people who have been building towards something realize the structure is holding. Raymond's statement is extraordinary, Diana said as he sat down. She didn't say hello. She said it the way you announce something that changes the shape of the day. He documented the phone call with Marcus in 2022. He kept notes. He wrote them the same night because he felt uncomfortable about the call and wanted a record. She turned the laptop. Marcus asked him specifically about Olivia's documentation habits, whether she kept personal copies of her work, whether she had a history of retaining files after leaving positions. The room went quiet. Olivia was standing very still at the counter. "He was checking," she said. "Before he hired me, he was checking whether I had the evidence to catch him." "And Raymond told him no," Diana said. "Because Raymond genuinely didn't know. He told Marcus he thought Olivia was thorough, but he had no reason to believe she retained personal copies of proprietary work." She paused. "Which means Marcus hired her believing she was a highly capable analyst who had already proven she wouldn't fight back and didn't have the documentation to do it effectively anyway." Olivia set her coffee down very carefully. "He built a trap," she said. Her voice was absolutely level. "He found someone brilliant enough to produce what he needed and broken enough he thought to stay quiet about it." "Yes," Diana said. Daniel watched Olivia absorb this. Watched her stand in her kitchen at noon on a Wednesday, processing the fact that the man who had stolen 14 months of her work had chosen her specifically because he thought her previous wound made her safe to steal from. He watched her make a decision. He could see it happen, not dramatically, not with visible anger, but in the specific way that Olivia Harper made decisions, which was completely all the way down, with no part of herself left out. "Add it to the federal disclosure," she said. "All of it. Raymond's statement the 2022 call the documentation of intent." She looked at Diana. "This isn't a gray area case. This is predatory. I want that on record." "It's already drafted," Diana said quietly. "I was waiting for you to tell me." "File it," Olivia said. Diana filed it at 12:27. At 1:15, Daniel's phone buzzed. "Kevin. Ethics firm contacted the company at 11. Marcus has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation as of 1 o'clock. The CPO made the call personally. HR director is apparently in with the CPO right now." Daniel read the text twice. Then he looked up at Olivia. "Administrative leave," he said. "Effective 1 o'clock. She stared at him. "That was fast," she said. "The CPO got the email you sent," he said. "Copied to the board ethics chair. With the federal disclosure already in the system, they didn't have room to protect him. The liability calculation changed overnight." She sat down slowly at the kitchen table. He could see her processing it, not with triumph, not the way he might have expected. With something more complicated. Relief and exhaustion, and the particular feeling of a person who has been braced against something for so long that when it finally gives the body, doesn't know how to stop bracing. "It's not over," she said. "The investigation takes months. He's on leave, not gone." "I know," he said. "But he's not in that building anymore. He's not making calls to board members. He's not accessing your files." He paused. "He's not running the room." She looked at the table for a moment. "I keep waiting to feel victorious," she said. "I thought I would. I spent 8 months imagining this moment." "What do you feel?" he said. She thought about it honestly the way she thought about everything. "Tired," she said. "And like I want this to have meant something beyond just stopping him." She looked up. "I want something to change. Not just for me. For the next person he would have done this to. For whoever he did it to before me." "Raymond Holt feels the same way," Diana said quietly from across the table. "He asked me this morning whether there was a way to make sure the industry saw this. Not the legal outcome, the pattern, the method." She paused. "There might be. If the investigation produces findings that are made public, and if Raymond and Olivia are both willing to speak to that publicly, there are journalists who cover corporate labor practices who would be very interested in a documented case of this scope." Olivia looked at Diana. "You're asking if I'd be willing to go public," she said. "Eventually," Diana said. "Not now. Not until the investigation is complete and your legal position is fully protected. But eventually." Olivia was quiet for a long moment. "Let me think about it," she said. But Daniel heard in her voice that she'd already decided. He was right. 3 months later, a piece ran in a national business publication, not a tabloid, not a blog, but the kind of serious long-form journalism that gets read by the people who make corporate policy. It described a documented pattern of intellectual property misappropriation by a senior logistics executive across 2 companies and 8 years. It named the method, "Identify high-performing analysts with prior trauma exploit their reluctance to advocate for themselves, present their work as your own." It included the metadata, evidence the email chain from February 22nd, Raymond Holt's account of the 2022 phone call, and the federal disclosure findings, which had been completed and made public 2 months prior. Olivia Harper was named in the piece. She chose that. She told Daniel the night before it ran, sitting at his kitchen table. Her kitchen table now felt too formal for conversations like this, and his had become the natural place for things that mattered, that she wanted her name on it, because anonymity felt like one more form of making herself small, and she was done making herself small. "What if it changes how people see you professionally?" he said. "It will change how people see me professionally," she said. "I'm counting on that." He looked at her. She looked back at him with the clear, level gaze of someone who had made their peace with something. "I spent 14 months being the most capable person in the room and the least visible," she said. "I am finished being invisible. Whatever comes from this, I want to be the woman who had the evidence and used it, not the woman who had the evidence and was afraid." She paused. "Emma was right." He blinked. What you told me. That the whole point of being capable of something is that you do it when it's needed." She held his gaze. "I'm capable of this. It's needed." So, he sat with that for a long moment. She had taken his words, his wife's words, and made them her own. He looked at the water stain on the ceiling. He'd finally fixed it. He'd done it the week after the filings on a Saturday morning, while Lily drew pictures at the kitchen table. It had taken 40 minutes. He didn't know why it had taken 4 years. "The article runs tomorrow," he said. "Yes." "You ready?" She thought about it. Genuinely thought about it the way she genuinely thought about everything. "No," she said. "But I'm doing it anyway." She looked at him. "That's different from not being ready, right? That's actually the thing." "That's exactly the thing," he said. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. It was the first time she'd done that. Just that her hand on his simple and warm, not dramatic, not weighted with anything beyond what it was, which was 2 people who had been alone for a long time choosing not to be anymore. He turned his hand over. She let him. The article ran the next morning. By noon, it had been read by 40,000 people. By evening, 3 other women had contacted Diana Walsh about similar experiences with Marcus Reed in previous positions. By the end of the week, 2 corporate governance organizations had cited it as a case study in systemic misappropriation. Marcus Reed resigned from his position at Meridian Logistics 9 days after the article ran, citing a desire to pursue other opportunities. The company issued a statement acknowledging the investigation's findings and announcing new intellectual property attribution protocols across all departments. Kevin Marsh was asked to lead the implementation committee. He accepted. He called Daniel the morning he got the offer and said, "They want someone they can trust to actually run it." Daniel said, "Take it." Kevin took it. Olivia was offered a promotion to Director of Strategic Analysis 3 weeks after Marcus's resignation. She was sitting in Daniel's kitchen when the call came. She'd been there for dinner, which happened several nights a week now, which had become simply how their lives were arranged, and she held the phone after the call ended and looked at it for a moment. "Director," she said. "What did you say?" Daniel said from across the table. "I said I needed 24 hours to consider the terms," she said. He looked at her. "Are you going to take it?" Lily asked from the end of the table. She'd been listening, which she always did, with the focused attention of someone who understood that adult conversations contained important information. Olivia looked at Lily. Lily looked back at her with Emma's eyes. Daniel's eyes. Lily's own eyes, open and direct, and completely without agenda. "Yes," Olivia said. "I'm going to take it." "Good," Lily said, and went back to her dinner with the satisfied air of someone who had just settled an important question. Olivia looked at Daniel. He looked back at her. Neither of them said anything, because nothing needed to be said, because they had gotten very good at communicating in the language they'd always used in actions in things quietly done and never overclaimed. He refilled her water glass. She passed him the bread without being asked. 6 months after the article ran, Olivia received a letter from a woman she didn't know. A logistics analyst at a company in Dallas, early 30s, who had read the piece and recognized her own situation in it, and had spent 3 weeks gathering the courage to document what was happening to her before she finally did, and who wrote to say that she wouldn't have known it was possible if she hadn't read about someone else who had done it first. Olivia read the letter at her kitchen table on a Saturday morning. She read it twice. Then she called Diana. "There's someone in Dallas who needs help," she said. "Tell me about her," Diana said. She did. That was how it grew. Not all at once. Not with fanfare. Not with any plan beyond the simple arithmetic of one person helping one person, which is how everything real has always grown. Daniel fixed things that were broken. Olivia documented things that needed to be documented. Kevin built systems that prevented the same thing from breaking the same way twice. Diana took calls from women in Dallas and Cleveland and Portland who had read an article and recognized themselves in it. Raymond Holt sent Olivia a handwritten letter 7 months after the investigation closed. It was 2 pages. It said he was sorry it took him so long. It said he hoped she understood that the guilt of that 2022 phone call had lived with him in ways he hadn't expected. It said he was glad she'd been stronger than Marcus had counted on. She wrote back. She said she forgave him. She said it clearly and without qualification. Because forgiveness, she had decided, was not the same as forgetting, and it was not the same as saying what happened was acceptable, and it was not extended to Marcus Reed, whose calculated deliberateness placed him in a different category entirely. But Raymond Holt had made a mistake under pressure and had spent years carrying it and had come forward when it mattered. That was worth something. She told Daniel about the letter on a Sunday afternoon in October, exactly 1 year after the evening he'd sat across from her in a darkened office and said, "People don't usually ask for things they need," which had been the beginning of everything. He listened to the whole thing. "You wrote him back," he said. "Yes." "That was the right call," he said. She looked at him. "I know," she said. "I'm getting better at knowing what the right call is." A beat. "I had good coaching." He looked out the window for a moment. Atlanta doing its October thing. The light at that particular angle, the air beginning to shift towards something cooler and more honest than summer. "You know what Lily asked me last week," he said. "What?" "She asked if you were going to be around for a long time." He looked back at Olivia. She wanted to know before she got more attached. Olivia went very still. "What did you tell her?" she asked. "I told her yes," he said simply. "I told her that was the plan." She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back. This was the part in movies where the music rose and the light turned golden. But this was not a movie. This was a kitchen in Atlanta on a Sunday afternoon, and 2 people who had been alone in ways that had cost them both, and Lily's crayon drawing still on the refrigerator. The house and the yellow sun, and the 2 figures outside, one tall and one small, with a 3rd figure added recently in orange crayon, standing next to the tall one, which Lily had added one afternoon, and which she had not explained, and which neither of them had asked her to explain, because some things are clearest when you let them stand without commentary. "Okay," Olivia said, quietly, completely. "Okay," he said. This was not a story about a man who rescued a woman. It was not a story about a woman who was saved by the right person arriving at the right time. It was a story about 2 people who had been invisible for so long they'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen, and who found each other in the specific way that real things are found. Not all at once, not dramatically, but through a fixed chair and a cup of coffee and a name written on a form in careful, precise handwriting when everything else had gone wrong. He had put his body between Olivia and the floor when she fell. She had put her name beside his in a moment of absolute terrified honesty. And from those 2 small, extraordinary acts of courage, they had built something that Marcus Reed and Raymond Holt and every person who had ever looked at either of them and seen someone unremarkable had never been able to build in their entire lives. They had built trust, And trust, it turns out, is the only foundation that doesn't crack when everything else does. Daniel Brooks had walked into that conference room an invisible man, and walked out of the year that followed as someone who finally understood that the quiet ones, the ones who show up early and stay late and fix the things no one notices are broken, are not the supporting cast. They are the story. And Olivia Harper, who had spent 34 years being told in every possible language that she was too much and not enough, simultaneously had learned the only thing that had ever needed learning. She was exactly enough. She always had been. The only thing that had ever been missing was someone who could see it clearly enough to say so out loud, and the courage to believe him when he did.